Uh-oh, I lost Bill. It says not visible director.
I see, Bill.
Linux is fun.
And this is why we love it.
Well,
Oh,
we're
We can't
streaming, and
blame,
all
we
four of
can't
us are
blame
on the.
Linux on Video Ninja. We can't blame Video Ninja's problems on Linux.
I can.
Well,
Okay, so
Probably shouldn't.
I hosted last time, so whose turn is it this time?
Hey, I could do it.
Go on.
I've never
I
hosted.
nominate Eric.
I
Eric,
don't
when
think I've
you're
ever
reading
hosted.
when you're reading everything, read it without like the episode 426, episode 426.5. Make sure you read them all, because what I do is I take out the one
Mhm.
that we don't need.
Yeah, actually, come to think of it, I did do it once. So this will
Yeah,
be my
I did
second
too when
time.
I first started. It didn't occur to me what that was for until I went.
Yeah,
and-
so
No,
far,
I mean that I hosted once before.
you?
so far I haven't had a single episode of Distro Hoppers that I didn't host. So I need to get off of my control freak
I was just about
platform
to use
and
those
let
exact words, Moss.
someone else host for a change.
It's like you and I were right here.
Will it happen? Who knows?
Can you hear
There
me
we
now,
go.
Moss?
Oh, Eric, Tony says
Apparently
that
not.
Tony
That's a
posted.
no.
Tony posted what he got on archive, and he had like 300 and something downloads of episode 47. When I go to archive, it doesn't even show 47.
Are you eating cottage cheese or is that ice cream
Ice
or
cream.
sherbet?
Ice cream. Sherbet.
Ice cream.
Actually,
Sherbet.
Sure, bet.
It's actually
There's only
sorbet.
one R in the word.
The heck is
Oh,
going on?
sorbet. That means the pint is like 75 calories.
Correct. It's just frozen juice, really. So, are we all groovy?
Well, I'm sure I'm drinking low calorie coffee.
Extremely low calorie coffee. As long as you like it black and bitter.
That's right. It's like my women,
Well, I do put milk in, but
hot, black, and strong.
Have you told your wife that?
She plays along.
can't tell who you're even talking to, Joe.
She likes her men the same way.
No, I hope not.
White and grumpy.
Can you hear me, Moss?
Obviously, he can't hear you.
Can you see me, Moss?
No, he can't see you either.
Can
No,
anybody else hear me?
I see four.
I
Yes.
can hear you. I can see you.
I see four people. I hear four people.
I see 4 plus me.
I see four, including me.
Man, I'll
I
tell
see
you what.
London. I see France.
This has got to be something on your end, Moss.
I'll do it again.
I see Williams underpants. Oh, Bill's back. Well, he was never gone for me.
I just reloaded too.
This is going to be a problem, isn't it?
Well,
Yes.
Moss is gone from the OBS now. Yeah. Oh, well, then you need to do something.
Oh my God. We are
The
such
cat
professionals.
Came back the very next day. The cat came back. We thought he was a goner.
I'm dreaming of a white Christmas.
It's
That's
actually
racist.
snowing.
Just like the ones I used to know.
Holy shit! Where did Bing Crosby
Now I
come
don't
from?
see Eric. I see a not visible unknown user, but that not Eric.
There you are, Moss.
All right. So should I
Well, the problem is now Majid
I'm here, but Eric
his
isn't.
eyes moved.
wait?
Yeah, Majid holds very still sometimes.
Hey, I'm here.
Majid goes into a state of suspended animation.
Torpor.
Well, I may be back, but Eric is not on the
Anesthesia.
screen now.
Maybe I end up in
Torpor.
anesthesia.
He's been on that special K.
Anesthetist.
That's what it is.
Anesthesia.
I'm an anesthetist.
Do you know there is a fantastic song called "Anesthetist" by Enter Shikari? That's what you know. What you know what? We're gonna put that in the check it out.
Do it.
Go for it, brother.
Do it.
I'm doing it now.
Can you
I
hear
still
everybody
don't-
now, Moss?
No, I do not see or hear Eric. It says his mic is off. It says not visible unknown user. So
All right,
technically,
let's just switch over to studio.
All right. What is the one
I'm for it.
common factor in all of this?
It's Moss. I'm aware.
It's
Linux.
not. Yes.
I'm in Mint. It should be working.
Just like his
Londoner-
website. It's Moss.
Londoner says that he can see and hear all this, which I think
That's harsh, Eric. That's very harsh.
He deserves every bit of it.
Oh, nothing but love there, right?
That's right.
Evidently, I need to reinstall Discord.
Hmm.
All right, I think we can get started.
How?
We can't-
No, Moss can't see everybody. We need to switch over to studio.
Oh God, I
Moss
got to
can't hear me.
retool everything if we do that.
Oh my God!
That means we have to start a new stream because I've got a complete.
All you have to do is switch OBS
All right,
over.
let me see if can I refresh and it won't screw
Yeah, go
stuff
ahead.
up. All right, I'm gonna refresh.
Why would you have to start a new stream? Don't you just have to refigure OBS? You can do that.
Eric.
You can do that the hard way.
Do I hear Eric?
Hallelujah.
Do not hear Eric.
Say something else, Eric.
Someone else.
Something
Okay,
else.
we're good.
Where I am.
Well, we were good. Now I got sneezed on.
Don't
He's
worry.
It was a
just-
cough.
Okay.
It was a cough, not a sneeze, but dementia.
The snuff.
Germs will be germs.
He just
Yeah.
All
snuffed
right.
on me.
Let's get this show on the
Are we
road.
good? Are we
Come on, melon farmers. Let's get going.
all right? You ready
Audacity.
to record?
Audacity. 3, 2, 1. Record. I was laughing too much.
It basically
That's okay.
sounds like
I'm
a
not
sound
catering
effect.
to that terrorist dog.
Yeah.
It
And
sounds
then
like-
my cat starts yowling outside my door.
Gosh.
Can we
All
just
right,
be
let's
clear
get
that
this
I'm?
started.
Can we just be clear that I'm not the terrorist dog that he's referring to?
That's a pretty racist
are all
statement you made
terrorists.
there.
He said that,
Come
not
on.
me.
That was
That's pretty
extremely
funny.
racist. I was
That's pretty
talking about the
funny.
literal dog.
Well,
Legit.
you are Americans. Who knows?
Top shelf, brother. Top shelf.
That was
All
so
right.
all of you.
Zeros, people. 3, 2, 1. 0.
Zero.
Oh.
Too
That's
busy
close
laughing
enough.
to say zero.
Take it away, Eric.
Drop that zero and get with the hero, baby. All right. Here we go.
Dog life.
Welcome to mintCast, the podcast by the Linux Mint community for all users of Linux. This is episode 426. This is episode 426.5, recorded on Sunday, November 26th, 2023.
Hoping you all had a great Thanksgiving. I'm Joe.
All anniversaried out. I'm Moss.
Thanksgiving is over. It's time to put up the tree. I'm Bill.
Still solvent. I'm Majid.
And still regretting eating so much, I'm Eric. First up in the news, mintCast has a birthday. Mint 21.3 is named. Amazon works on a Linux fork for their devices. Ubuntu commits to NetPlan. Firefox attempts Wayland. FreeBSD 14 is out. Endeavor releases Galileo. Vivaldi comes to FlatHub. Google kills magazine content. OpenMandriva reduces OpenMandriva releases Rock 5.0. Pipewire reaches 1.0.0. In security and privacy, Google's Chrome privacy washing. Then in our wonderings, Bill may just have lost his mind. Were there any doubts? Joe prints everything but money. Majid does VR. Moss hangs on, and I spend more quality time with my Linux tablet. In our innards section, tablets, Linux tablets, And finally, the feedback and a couple of suggestions.
That was supposed to be James Bond style. Tablets, Linux tablets.
Oh, well, you got to coach me, man. Do you want me to do it again? I will. I'll do it again. And in our innards section, tablets, Linux tablets.
Lovely. One more thing, I got to move around.
You could just go with the original one, but that's up to you.
We'll see how it goes. I might forget the whole thing. And
It's a new one for the blooper reel.
First up in the news, we've got Bill.
All right. So, yeah, as we alluded to before, mintCast turns 15 on Thursday, November 24th. Yeah, let's all nice round of applause.
All right.
mintCast celebrated its 15th birthday on November 24th, 2008. The very first episode of mintCast was broadcast with just a single host, Charles Olson. It wasn't until episode 3 that a second host joined, Charles. To mark this special event, the current team have commissioned new theme music and bumpers. Also, our very own Moss has updated the closing outro, replacing the long-running version made by Rob Hawkins, who was a host from 2011 to 2018. Thanks to Interfection for creating the new music, and to all the previous hosts for helping to make mintCast into a great show it is today. All the previous shows are available at mintcast.org, and many of the previous hosts are interviewed as part of episode 300. And I'll also, yeah, they're on mintcast.org, but they're also, that really just links you to the archive.org page where literally every single episode since the beginning is and always will be, I hope. But yeah, here.
Very cool. Very cool. I'm
Yep.
very proud to be a part of it.
Yeah, me too. And I hope everybody likes the theme music. My son makes electronic music, and he was gracious enough to do the work, which is not. It's not an unconsiderable amount of work to do. I can only imagine, you know, besides, leaving aside the fact that it's only a few seconds of music, but there's a lot of layers of things involved, So
Thanks, Bill's kid.
Yep.
All right. So up next, we have Linux Mint 21.3 has been named. This is from Londoner. While browsing through packages.linuxmint.com earlier today, I noticed that Mint 21.3 has been assigned the code name Virginia. 21.3 is expected to be released just before Christmas, so you can also expect a beta release very soon.
Yes, Santa Claus, there is a Virginia.
Good reference.
Okay, so I'll go on. So Amazon moves from Android fork to Linux, and this is from OMG Ubuntu. So word has come of Amazon's new OS, which is being developed under the code name Vega, and this comes from Low Pass journalist Janko Reutgers. Reutgers says he spoke to sources who say Amazon is building its own iOS Android competitor and has tasked hundreds of people, end quote, within the Amazon Device OS group with building it. The group, interestingly, includes Mozilla engineer Zibi Branicki, who tweeted earlier this year to say that he's working at Amazon on the next generation of operating systems for smart home, automotive, and other Amazon device product lines. The source said that most of the OS development is already done, and they expect Vega, which I think is a cool code name to have. I've been on a real Street Fighter tip recently.
If you're not into old Chevys.
So anyway, they expect it to begin shipping on Fire TVs next year, and an SDK is now being ready for release, so developers have time to port their apps to Vega. The new operating system is also based on a flavor of Linux and is using a more web-forward application model, and app developers are being told to use React Native as an application framework, which allows them to build native apps with JavaScript-powered interfaces. This so says Reutgers. So now the question then comes, doesn't Amazon run Linux already? Well, actually, No. Amazon produces a slate of devices, including smart TVs, displays, and speakers, and they all run Fire OS, which is a fork of Android based on the AOSP. Vega, the new system, is not another Android fork, nor is it based on AOSP. It's Linux. And the eventual goal is to moving away from relying on Android for all the new hardware devices. Apparently, it's primed for low power devices that struggle with the bloat that Android, ostensibly a mobile phone OS, comes with, meaning Fire TVs, smart displays, smart speakers, etc. So, despite the appetite for one, Vega isn't going to be an Android killer. It's probably not going to bring an influx of big name apps to benefit regular Linux distros, nor are we going to see Amazon do something crazy like create a new Linux tablet interface. Plus, we are talking about Amazon. They have canned things even after putting lots of money into it. I remember reading a thing about how the Echoes have been a massive loss leader for them. If it does work out though, and it proves a hit with consumers, who knows what it could support power or run in the future. Now, side note in the article is that someone purporting to be working at Amazon on Vega OS said that the latest versions of Echo Show 5 and Echo Show 15 already run Vega, which is interesting. And you might notice that they're faster than previous generations. Now, obviously, if they do go with this, it's going to reduce Amazon's reliance on Android and to a degree Google, and allow them to innovate more rapidly. Something interesting, which I found from the article, is the fact that many Fire devices are still actually on a base Android of 7, which is quite a while ago. And so, if you have an agile, lightweight, unified platform, that should be easier for them to monetize.
Now, I was that the end of the article? 'Cause I
No,
got a couple things here.
just one last thing I was just going to mention.
Okay.
One thing that is written in the article, and I think I do actually agree with, is whether we would actually want to buy something with Vega OS or not. Having more Linux out there is a good thing, I think.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I want to say is the Chevy Vega is one of the greatest drag cars ever made.
That was the greatest piece of crap
Just
ever
that.
made.
No, once you retool it, that giant front end on that thing
They
and the
replaced
narrow,
everything that moves on that thing.
yes, but it's still the frame and the body makes it the best drag car you could possibly imagine, considering how big that front end. You can drop a 454 in there and not care and still be able to stand next to the end. Okay, I'm done with that particular rant.
So here's my question: are we going to have native Linux consumption apps for this thing?
So
Would be nice.
that was something I'm guessing that at least at first there's going to be an Android compatibility layer. How are they going to build native apps
That they would have
without
to
the
build
support?
them themselves, and
Yeah.
Not
that
only
means,
that,
no.
I still
And
am excited that they're putting Linux on everything, including TVs and all that jazz. That is, it is a plus. But the problem gets to be this is Amazon, and they're going to have it so locked down that you
Oh,
can't
yeah.
put anything else on it. There will be no customization that isn't Amazon controlled until you get people like us going in there making it happen. Anyway.
Well, let's be.
Yeah, I
let's be
can see
optimistic.
everyone rewriting their Fire Sticks.
I mean, I
people
think, if you look at the fact that, there are such things as Roku sticks, and, I don't know what OS they run, but obviously, the apps
Android.
are a lot more controlled. In one sense, do you really need that many apps on a smart TV? You need Netflix, you need Prime, you need Disney,
No,
you need BBC
Yeah, but
iPlayer.
those are very important apps, and they have to work very well. They have to
True.
be able to, be
continuously
performant
receive updates. When
Yes.
do they stop receiving updates?
I
When
mean,
does
so-
Amazon say buy another TV because we don't want you to have that old one?
Yeah,
We're
and
not
if you're the
talking
man in
about
the
an
middle,
enthusiast device. We're talking about a mass. We're
Yeah.
talking about a device that normal people are going to buy, which means if the apps don't work, the app platform gets the blame for it.
right?
I mean, but Amazon are just going to pay these guys to make their apps. I mean, because they have a vested interest in making sure
No.
Netflix works or Disney works,
No,
isn't it?
Amazon is not going to pay those guys to make those apps. Those apps are going to pay to be on Amazon's platform,
Which is Linux. And if we're going to be optimistic, it means that I'll be able to take a Raspberry Pi at some point and make some sort of TV interface for it on Raspberry Pi OS, and then I'll have native Netflix apps to put on.
No, Amazon, I don't know, it's not, a well-known thing. I don't know if people are aware or not, but previously in the past, you could take the A word, the thing you have in your living room that you talk to and make things happen,
Maybe
the
you
echoes.
Tube.
Yeah, the lady tubes. You could put that on a Raspberry Pi and develop for it, make it work just from a Raspberry Pi, just the way it would with a pre-bought device using an Amazon developer account. But then Amazon made changes, and guess what? You couldn't anymore. And then I think they turned it back on, but I don't know. I haven't tried in a really long time. I'd have to check my Amazon developer account to see if I can still do that. But it is something that they can take away from you anytime they want because it's their platform.
I mean, ultimately, as far as I can see, this is Amazon wanting to have as little reliance on other parties, Google, basically, as they
And
can.
Linux is perfect for it because of the scalability. But they're not going to like the openness of it because they want control.
And I think even if they perfected an Amazon application layer, or Amazon, like an Android application layer, that would still be a cool thing to have for, the hobbyist that wants to take a Raspberry Pi or something like that and make like a.
I'd love for them to mass produce Linux tablets, even if they did skin on top of it and try and prevent you from doing things, because eventually we will find a way around it and root and ROM it, and it will be a Linux tablet, mass market.
That's only a matter of time. I think it's inevitable.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Majid. Did you have something else you wanted to interject there?
No, I was just going to say that that's something I hadn't thought of, and actually, that would be very cool. Actually, that would be very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, Ubuntu 24.04 LTS committing fully to NetPlan for network configuration. This is from Phoronix. The Canonical developed NetPlan has served for Linux network configuration on Ubuntu server and cloud versions for years. With the recent Ubuntu 23.10 release, NetPlan is now being used by default on the desktop. Canonical is committing to fully leveraging NetPlan for network configuration with the upcoming Ubuntu 24.04 LTS release, and in turn also marking the NetPlan 1.0 release. NetPlan is Canonical's network configuration manager for Linux systems with network interfaces being described via YAML files. NetPlan considers itself a network configuration abstraction renderer that in turn interfaces with Network Manager or Systemd Network D. NetPlan finally made its way to the Ubuntu 23.10 desktop by default, with having better integration for knowing when connections are created/modified through Network Manager. For Ubuntu 24.04 LTS, Canonical plans to polish the NetPlan codebase and deliver a NetPlan 1.0 release with API/ABI stability. They are also hoping other Linux distributions begin adopting NetPlan. Debian so far has decided to go with NetPlan for their network stack on Debian Cloud Images. NetPlan can be used transparently to control a workstation's network configuration and plays hand in hand with many desktop environments through its tight integration with Network Manager. It allows for easy network monitoring using common graphical interfaces and provides a single source of truth to network administrators, allowing for configuration of Ubuntu desktop fleets in a streamlined and declarative way. More details on the Ubuntu blog, link in the show notes.
I remember the first time I had to make a change to I'm not sure which version, if it was 1804 that they put NetPlan in place. Maybe it was even 1604, but I went looking for the normal network controls and configuration options. I'm like, okay. And, just adapting to the YAML format. But I could see how this would be really helpful in orchestration and being able to just put a file out in a directory somewhere and have that be the source of truth, because there are definitely times where, depending on the network software, the stacks that are software that are installed, especially from a configuration standpoint, where it's like, okay, which of these is the source of truth and which one is just sort of, there but not actually controlling anything, it can get really complicated. And so NetPlan, from a server standpoint, at least in my usage of it in the last 5 years, has been a lot easier, honestly.
Yeah, it's fine. I was lucky enough to not have to deal with it until I set these two boxes up, and they're on. I started them with 2004, I think. Yeah, they're on 2204 now, and it went to NetPlan, and that was the first time I'd ever heard of it. But I can't say that from a just command line perspective, it's any more difficult to understand than. But if you were just thrown at it without any documentation, real good documentation, um, I can imagine that'd be a little bit, especially if you're not experienced with YAML files,
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. YAML can be a little, especially because of the need for proper spacing and like that kind of weird
about the spacing.
Yeah, that can be a little weird for someone who doesn't quite understand the structure, but I do like the declarative nature where it's just sort of like, this is what I need it to do, and here are the options. And once you get past that initial kind of hurdle, it makes more sense, I think, than previous things.
Yeah.
Okay, Firefox is going to try to ship Wayland as default from Phoronix. Guardrails have been in place where Firefox browser has enabled Wayland by default when running on recent GTK versions, but as of November 24th, that code has been removed. Firefox will try to move forward with stable releases where Wayland will ship by default. Mozilla bug 1752398 to ship the Wayland backend to release has been closed. After the ticket was open for the past 2 years, it is now deemed ready to hopefully ship enabled for Firefox 121. This patch drops the early beta or earlier check to let Wayland support be enabled by default when running on recent GTK versions. That's GTK 3.24.30 threshold. Firefox 121 is due for release around 19th of December, and if all continues to hold, it will finally ship with the Wayland backend enabled by default as another big step forward. With KDE Plasma 6 using Wayland by default, X-Wayland root full mode improving, and other X-Wayland progress, 2024 could very well be the year of Wayland shining in the Linux desktop limelight.
It's definitely one more thing, right? I mean, in terms of the overall panacea of desktop software, Firefox is a pretty big one, especially in desktop Linux. And so anything they do to support Wayland signals to others, hey, this is for real and we're going to move forward on this. So that's a good thing.
Well, except that almost all the others are based on Chromium, and I don't know how Firefox code will manage to sneak over to them.
Well, I had to tell on my laptop that's running Wayland, I had to tell both of those browsers to use Wayland. So that was about 6 months ago, I think, when I set those.
What were you experiencing before you switched it?
It was just blurry because it was using X Wayland, so it was just. I mean, it looked. You might have considered it normal a few years ago, but it wasn't sharp like
yeah, I know what you mean.
Wayland
Yep.
application. And then when I enabled it, and it's not an immediately obvious thing either. If you don't know what you're looking for in the flags, you're not going to know what to enable, because it's kind of the incantation is kind of spurious the way it's written, but it's well documented. So all you need to do is look up how to enable Wayland on Chromium or Wayland on Firefox. But according to this, we're not going to need to do that anymore.
I was just going to say, without something like this, how would you even know necessarily? You might just say, well, God, Firefox looks terrible. Like, I don't think I'll use Firefox anymore because it looks so bad.
I can't remember why I knew that it wasn't using it.
With the changes that are coming to Chrome, a lot of people are going to be switching to Firefox. At least, techie people.
Yeah.
You have to imagine so. Yeah.
More on that later.
Yep.
All right. FreeBSD 14 is released. This is from the FreeBSD blog. The FreeBSD release engineering team is pleased to announce the availability of FreeBSD 14.0 release. This is the first release from the stable/14 branch. and everything just jumped. I was reading and it just went away.
It did for me too. Oh, it's because Moss
Twice.
is making things.
Moss is not doing anything. It's
No,
doing for me too.
yeah, it's something else here. Okay, some of the highlights. OpenSSH has been updated to version 9.5p1. OpenSSL has been updated to version 3.0.12, a major upgrade from OpenSSL 1.1.1t in FreeBSD 13.2 release. The BHYVE Vive
Beehive.
Hyper Beehive, thank
Beehive.
you. Beehive Hypervisor now supports TPM and GPU pass-through. FreeBSD supports up to 1024 cores on the AMD 64 and ARM 64 platforms. ZFS has been upgraded to OpenZFS Release 2.2, providing significant performance improvements. It is now possible to perform background file system checks on UFS file systems running with journaled soft updates. Experimental ZFS images are now available for AWS and Azure. The default congestion control mechanism for TCP is now cubic, and much more. For a complete list of new features and known problems, please see the online release notes and errata list available at the 2 links in the show notes. For more information about FreeBSD release engineering activities, please see release engineering link in the show notes.
Anybody ever ran BSD?
I was
I
going to ask that
have. It's been a
exact
long
question.
time.
Yeah, back in the day, honestly, especially before Linux had a lot of had systemd, had a lot of the sort of hardware enablement stuff, before the kernel had a lot of that built in. FreeBSD, or just BSD, and Linux had a lot in common. And I mean, yes, BSD has ports and different sort of way of handling software and things like that, but ultimately, the init systems and there were more similarities than differences. And as time went on, BSD sort of really stuck to that that Unix philosophy, whereas Linux got a little easier to use, a little more inclusive, and grew to what it is today, where and also FreeBSD chose not to backport that stuff or use that stuff in BSD, the Linux stuff that they Linux had come up with. So running BSD, especially on the desktop, can be difficult because it just doesn't have some of the creature comforts that you would expect from, let's say, if you were a Linux user. But back in the day, I would run FreeBSD, OpenBSD, Firefly, all these different BSDs alongside Linux. And honestly, they really weren't any different. Very, very, again, much more similar than dissimilar. But now that's definitely not true, at least, in my usage of it in recent memory. Still great on the server, though. And that's where BSD definitely shines, is for server tasks. It's still an excellent system for that. So
It seems like that used to be the platform you would go for if you needed, uh, Class A, first class access to like ZFS and things like that. And
yeah,
nowadays, Ubuntu's got it in tree, so it's not so much the case anymore. And then, it was also probably a better option if, for routers and things like that. And that might still be the case, actually. Um,
yeah.
but it's always been a curiosity of mine. I've just never had the time to, or not like a definite use case for it, so I've never taken the time to install it on anything.
Yeah, it's a specialized thing, but in certain verticals in IT, it's definitely the better choice, or the best choice for specific things. So it has a strong following in those circles. But in terms of just general everyday use, and I'm sure some angry BSD user is going to contradict me, but I think by and large, it's just not. It's not as straightforward as running Linux is these days.
I think they know that. They got to be used to the abuse by now. I would think.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, then. So, Endeavour OS releases the Galileo desktop. So, this is from the Endeavour OS blog, and they say that it has taken a while to develop this release, but Endeavour is still here. And despite life throwing in extra challenges for each of our team members the past months, we are proud to present our Galileo ISO with significant changes. So, just as a reminder, the changes described here are affecting new installs, the Calamaris installer, the live environment on the ISO only. Running systems don't have an upgrade to Galileo. However, if you update your system regularly, you'll be fine. With Galileo, the team focused on keeping Endeavour OS rolling by streamlining the workflow of the team. This meant they had to make switches and cuts to fit the amount of work behind the scenes with the team's day-to-day life and challenges and obligations. Despite having slimmed down the features on their ISO, Galileo is still a genuine Endeavour OS release. This means a jump start into Arch without too many pre-settings we think you should need so you can tailor your system to your needs. To make development and maintenance easier for the team, they switched to KDE Plasma instead of XFCE. Thank God for that, due to a more native experience for our developers with the Calamaris installer. This only affects the live environment and the offline install option. When choosing the online install option, XFCE is still there as an option to choose from. For those odd people who like the XFCE theming they created, this option will be available after installation through the Welcome app. The community editions Sway, Qtile, BSP, WM, OpenBox, and Worm aren't available anymore through the Calamaris installer. Most of the original devs left the project, and there's nobody who picked it up from them to make it work with each Calamaris update. For a while, the core dev team discreetly picked up the work, but they had to make this decision in order for the project to go forward. The community editions are still available, installing them manually through the GitHub page. Local hostname resolution will be enabled on a new install. This was a community request to simplify the process to enable network printers described in our Discovery Network printer article. Local hostname resolution being enabled doesn't mean network printers are enabled by default. You still have to go through some steps to enable it manually. When Lux encryption with system D boot is chosen, the system will be installed with a stronger Lux 2 encryption using Argon 2 ID. From now on, only one DE window manager option can be installed within the Calamaris installer to prevent issues regarding conflicting packages after installation.
I did install this on my test machine 2 days ago. The installer did not feel like Calamaris to me. It had some really weird touches to it. It looks nice, but I looked at it for, like I said, a couple days, and I already have another distro waiting to be replacing it on my test machine.
So, is it a case that they skinned it, or does it fundamentally look different?
It does look different. The Galileo wallpaper is very different, but of course, anyone can change wallpaper. But it felt more wrong than it used to. And I used to like Endeavor, except it didn't play well with my other distros. Well, this time I installed it as the only distro on the machine, and I don't like it. But I'm not a big Arch person anyhow, so.
I mean, I recently been dallying in Arch with my Manjaro install, and I remember when I went for that, a lot of people often said, "Oh, have a look at Endeavor, see if Endeavor is."
Oh, have you been using Arch?
Yeah, I don't know if I've mentioned that.
What's that now?
Bill.
Hey.
Hey, I heard a
to see
rumor.
ya.
I'm not sure about this, but I heard a rumor that you might be running Arch. Is that
I
true?
might have mentioned it a time or two. I don't recall.
Do you think so? Do you think I might have mentioned that I also have jumped on the bandwagon recently?
Well, I hope so, because that's the rules.
Well, I am replacing Arch. I think I'm going to open Mandriva.
Moss runs Arch. I can't even say it. It doesn't want to come out of my mouth without my.
I have run a few
flying out of
different
my
types
head.
of Arch over the years. I've
Yeah.
tried Manjaro a few times. I've tried Blend OS. I tried
I am so going to install
Big
some
Linux.
Arch before the next show. I don't know what machine it's going on, but I am installing Arch.
Daily driver. You got to do it.
And I think I tried a couple of other Arches, but it's just not my thing.
Endeavor is Arch. I mean, Endeavor is as close as you can get without actually downloading your ISO from archlinux.org or whatever it is and doing it either the hard way, which nobody does anymore, or the Arch install thing, which I would argue is just as simple as Calamaris or any of those, Ubiquity or whatever. Um, it's just not fun to look at, I guess.
So it's
Well,
more
I
Arch
use the net
than
installer, and
Manjaro then.
I
Yes,
use I use the net installer, and I use the LXQT desktop. But
yeah,
you can do that with the
one of
net
those things is
installer.
okay. Um, yeah, if you use Endeavor though, when you get done, what you're going to end up with is Arch with this one tiny little repo added to it that has a couple of these kind of half GUI tools that Endeavor makes just to make the whole Pac-Man experience a little more, because Arch is really meant to be managed from the command line, for everything, installing your packages and managing pretty much everything. So Endeavor just makes these they're kind of half. I don't want to say half baked because they're well made. They work well, but they're not full GUI apps. They're really just kind of presenting you with a list of things and some tick boxes, and then maybe a button here to execute whatever it is you're going to do, to kind of simplify the whole process for you. But Endeavor, yeah, if you want a good Calamaris installer and a desktop working right from the beginning with some of the decisions made for you, then that's probably as close as you can get. So
Okay, moving on. Vivaldi comes to FlatHub. So this is from OMG Ubuntu. Fans of the Vivaldi browser will be pleased to hear it's now available to install from FlatHub. Vivaldi's FlatHub package is not official or verified, as the store listing makes that clear. The hope want is to make it official or verified down the line, but for now, Vivaldi's FlatHub presence is there to test the waters. Vivaldi's Rory Odegaard, I probably butchered that, says and help satisfy the overwhelming demand from users for the browser to be available on the store in some guise. For those who don't know, Vivaldi launched in 2015, offering day one Linux support. It provides official Deb and RPM packages for major Linux distributions through its website. These packages may remain the recommended way to install the app on Linux. Even so, making a Flatpak available on FlatHub, even if it's not official yet, will make the browser reach a much wider audience, like those with Steam Decks in their hands. So the question then comes, why is it not official? Well, there are a number of web browsers on FlatHub, including official builds of Firefox, GNOME, KD, Falcon, but few, if any, Chromium-based browsers are official or verified. Vivaldi is Chromium-based. Part of this might be due to uncertainties with how secure Chromium Sandbox is when run in a Flatpak environment. Flatpak doesn't allow important parts of the Chromium Sandbox to work as it should. Chromium browsers and Electron apps distributed on FlatHub all rely on a third-party package called Zypack to trick Chromium into thinking its SUID sandbox is present. Further testing is required to find out if important software such as browsers relying on tricks to function induce any security drawbacks. So it's a trend in the right direction. Official or not, this edition makes it easier to install Vivaldi on Linux. You don't need to go find any installers, and lets users get future updates quicker, thanks to automatic updates. Browsers also now place to reach a wider audience, potentially growing its user base as a result. Plus, some unofficial FlatHub packages became official this year, including Thunderbird, Discord, and which, prior to verification, had already racked up millions of installs. Should Vivaldi become official in time, too, its backing would signal to other software vendors that FlatHub is where it's at, because it really is. Increasingly, FlatHub is not just where Linux users go to find software, but where they expect to find software. So the reason I offered to talk about this was because I am a regular user of Vivaldi. It's become my browser of choice now. Over the
Running
last
that filthy Farron OS, are you?
Well, no, I mean even before I installed Ferrin, I'd gone over to Vivaldi. I like the fact that it was Chromium based. It had a good sync function. I could block block trackers, block ads,
Got to block those chads.
and the chads as well. And it worked well. And let's be honest. Vast majority of the internet works better on Chromium-based browsers. It's not.
what
It's not a
sad
nice.
words you speak.
I know it's not. I know that's not Right, but that's unfortunately kind of the way it is because Google Chrome is so ubiquitous. And as much as I love Firefox and I still have Firefox, I made a decision about a year, 18 months ago that I was going to move over to a Chromium-based browser for that exact reason. Initially, I went for Brave, and now I've gone for Vivaldi. Now, so I was, so that's one point that I actually use Vivaldi. The second point is that as I'll probably mention in my wanderings, and I don't know if you've already guessed already, I also run Arch, by the way, sort of, in that
Hey.
I have a Manjaro install on my daily driver laptop, actually. And when I went to download Vivaldi, I still am having, I won't say I'm having trouble, I haven't got my head around the AUR properly yet. And so just as I said, just as I mean, I only did that maybe a week, 2 weeks ago. This news then came up saying that it was on FlatHub. So I went to FlatHub and I downloaded Vivaldi and installed it on my on that box from there, and it works fine. You wouldn't know it wasn't anything else, to be honest. And so, yeah, I'm quite. This is good news as far as I'm concerned. The other thing is that because it's on FlatHub, if you did want to use it on any other Linux distro as well, without necessarily downloading a deb or an RPM, again, you've got access to it. So, and the other point that they mentioned in the news article, that lots of things were put on FlatHub before being made official, like Discord and whatever. And so, really, yes, it might be unofficial now, but it's you can see that there's a well-worn path to becoming a official verified release.
All that being said, I cannot, in good conscience, recommend anybody install it this way. When the reason it's not, as he pointed out, the reason that it's not official is because of the sandboxing mechanism that Google uses in the Chromium base is a little bit flaky when put into a confined environment. And all of the layers of abstraction you've got to put into place just to make it work. There's no way to know whether you're getting the benefit of either the sandboxing or the confinement from the Flatpak itself. So, I have to recommend caution to anybody that wants to. And most of that's because you can get debs for all of these browsers, like Vivaldi, like oh, anything Chromium based. You can get debs for it right down to the main Chrome itself. And as far as the AUR goes, the only reason it's in the AUR and not in the main package repos is because it's not an open source. It doesn't follow Arch Linux packaging sort of ethos. So it's never, whether it's source code or it's a binary, it'll still be in the AUR, but you're fundamentally not doing anything different than just downloading the package. It's just not going to be in the regular repos. So, I mean, that is just my opinion, take it for what it's worth. But until we know that these things are safe to run when installed from FlatHub or whatever, I can't. It seems a little bit shaky. It doesn't seem like it's worth the risk to me.
So, is this why you find that there are snaps of certain Chromium-based browsers, and I'm thinking specifically of Brave here, that a snap came before a FlatHub app?
See, I don't know. There must be fundamental differences in the way the sandboxing works, and Canonical is when Canonical recommends to use the snap, what they're really recommending for is just their operating system, their Ubuntu, proper, because they're controlling the way that software works from top to bottom. They've got the proper version of AppArmor installed, which handles these things as well. I can't say that it's better than Flatpak or not, but I do, to some degree, I do trust Canonical when they say that this, that we're going to package Chromium this way because it is the best way to ensure security and maintain all these different version numbers. I do trust them as far as that goes because there is a bit more of a commercial imperative behind what they're doing, uh, as opposed to what Flatpak is trying to accomplish here, which is just making the software available to more people. Which that's a noble cause, but there's problems that need to be worked out before we can even say that this is a good way to install that software, especially when you do have options.
Yeah, and I think a browser, because it's so central,
Yeah.
and the ability of nefarious software and phishing attempts, and there's so many attack vectors that come through browsers and email, that those two things in particular seem to be the type of thing that you definitely want to put a best practice around.
You don't want to take chances with unnecessary.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, honestly, I think snap isolation for a lot of things is just absolute overkill. It's just silly in some cases, and it makes it way harder to use. But I think in this case, these things, it does make a lot of sense. So, all right. It took me about 15 minutes to get the document to load again, but here we are. Google News is shutting down purchased magazine content and offering refunds. This is from Ars Technica. Google News is known to most people as a big pile of web links, but it's actually hosting magazines too. Before the days of the internet, a magazine was a big bundle of paper full of articles you could get shipped to your door, sort of like if you printed out a website. Can't believe I just read that.
I love this
I feel like
explanation.
we got made fun of right there. I'm not sure.
You think? This is for anyone under 30.
Wait. Google's shutting things down?
Well, yeah, you have that first of all, but then the second thing of me describing what a magazine is as such a banal way to describe it. So, anyway, for a time you could pay cold hard cash for a digital copy of a paper magazine through Google, and then view that content through whatever the latest Google Magazine News app was. Magazine content sales were shut down in 2020, though, and soon Google's magazine content will no longer be hosted online. The company announced on a support page that purchased content will be shut down starting December 18th. Google started selling magazines in 2012 with Google Play Magazines. You could buy individual magazine issues for around $8 or subscribe yearly for $11. Remember when people paid for things?
Yeah, you paid for a thing and then you had a thing in your hand and it was your thing,
Yeah. Like I paid money
Bill's
for
thing is in his
journalism.
hand?
Well, I paid money for journalism. What an insane idea.
Yeah.
These were all hosted by Google with access available through the app and web. 1 year later, in 2013, Play Magazines was merged with another Google News app, Google Currents. Oh my goodness, what a blast to the past this whole article is, to create Google Play Newsstand. Newsstand featured paid magazines and free website content. Google spent 2013 to 2016 rolling out purchasing support across more and more countries. By 2018, Play Newsstand was replaced by the first Google News app, a long overdue entry in the Google app portfolio given how much of a powerhouse Google News has been online. The new app focused more on online content but kept a spot for your magazine subscriptions. The Android Google News app still has the same package name from 2012, com.google.android.apps.magazines. With sales of new magazines dead in 2020, it was only a matter of time until Google shut down the hosting of old purchased magazine content. The good news is that you can download a PDF of your purchased magazines before December 18th. Anyone who has purchased magazine content should be getting an email with an option to download or, for some magazines, request a refund. Google says that some magazines will be refund eligible because they contain interactive elements that cannot be downloaded and saved for future access. December 18th isn't just the date for the hosting shutdown, but also the deadline for downloads of refund requests. Offering a PDF download is better than nothing, but static PDFs are a lot more cumbersome and miserable than slick user experience of Google's original magazine offering on all of your devices. Remember, all online content purchases are really just rentals. Isn't that true?
Yeah, this article makes me think of how I would explain books to my kids and what they are. And I have to start off with, you see, before there was fan fiction, there was actual fiction.
Uh-oh. Majid, you've started purring again.
Yeah,
That was my fault. I turned something on.
Yeah, it's not my fault for a change.
Oh.
Just had to touch something, didn't you, Bill?
Fix it.
I fixed it.
No, you didn't.
He's got to recognize the request. There we go.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that's me not messing with his stuff no more.
Yeah, Joe, it's funny you mentioned it that way because I know the beginning of this article is a little sort of tongue in cheek. But yeah, I had, for the longest time, I was subscribed to a lot of magazines because I would get deals from like airline miles or credit cards, offers, or like all these different ways that magazines tried to boost their sales.
Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes.
Right. Whatever it is. And so I had stacks of Wired and what else? Like PC Magazine and Linux Journal and like all these different magazines. And it was just, I never could read them all. There was just too much. I would take 3 or 4 with me on a flight thinking, okay, I'll flip through them. And I would a little bit. But then once I had a portable computer, or portable devices like smartphones and tablets and stuff came in, it was kind of like, magazines are sort of dead. So it's actually surprising to me that they still supported it.
I think if I looked through my bookcase hard enough, I would find the magazine copy of GTA Vice City walkthrough.
Nice.
Okay, Open Mandriva LX5 was released. This is from the Open Mandriva blog. Open Mandriva LX 5.0, the long-awaited release of the independent community-controlled distribution's fixed-point release branch, as opposed to its rolling release branch, has been released. This is expected to be the last major release featuring the Plasma 5 desktop. In the 1.5 years since the previous fixed-point release, OMLX 4.3, many things have changed. Among others, the new release is based on kernel 6.6 LTS, kernel-desktop-6.6.2, -6.7.0-RC2 is also available. Mesa 23.3.0 RC4, Qt 5.15.11, plus KDE patches on 6.6.0, KDE Frameworks 5.112, KDE Gear 23.08.3, Plasma 5.27.9.1, LibreOffice 7.6.3, and other current open source software. Outside of component updates, this is the first fixed-point release that merges the root and user file systems. All recent security vulnerabilities, such as the frequently reported ones affecting glibc and curl, have been addressed as soon as relevant patches have been available. That was an interesting sentence. Users of OMLX 4.x releases are strongly advised to opt for a fresh installation of 5.0 for enhanced security. People using Open Mandriva Rome rolling release or Cooker don't need to update. All new features provided in 5.0 are already available on the rolling release branches and have been tested extensively there. New variants of the distribution, such as a server-centric spin and versions for various ARM boards, will follow shortly. We're still working on the best way to bring features like a fully open graphics stack, even on the Mali G610 GPU found, for example, in Rockchip 3588 boards. Current snapshots are promising. A RISC-V port is also in progress, but will likely not be ready for a fixed point release before 6.0. And this is the next one I'm going to be trying out on my testing machine. Possibly, if it works nicely, for distro hoppers.
I've tried Open Mandriva. I've never actually used it in anger. It just feels like a little bit old school to me. Um, I don't know. It seemed like everything was there, everything worked, but like I said, I've never actually used it.
It really is the most complete of the Mandrake remnants. It's really funny because Magia seems to have most of the original team, but Open Mandriva is being run by the community and seems to be getting more done.
Yeah, and both of them, honestly, it's really, to me, a nostalgic thing. They harken back to that Mandrake era. And in practice, though, today, the tool set, the package manager, all the stuff, just like you said, Bill, it feels very dated at this point. So you'd have to have either a pretty specific reason to run it, in my mind, but maybe I'm just not seeing something.
It just kind of exists for the people that run it.
Yeah, I think so.
Used it, which is great.
Yep, plenty of room for everybody, no doubt. So, all right. Well, Pipewire reaches 1.0.0. This is from gitlab.freedesktop.org via Londoner. Earlier today, Pipewire 1.0.0 El Presidente was released. Props on the name there. Pipewire was originally released in June 2017. God, has it really been that long?
Oh, man.
I am getting old. As a server for handling audio and video streams. I know, right? Getting older. How's that?
And we didn't mention this back when we were talking on Wayland.
How
old is Wayland?
I know. What? It's over 15 years, I think. Anyway. But Pipewire actually got into circulation fairly quickly and has become pretty much the de facto standard. Or at least it's very close at this point. Oh my! Anyway, so it's a server for handling audio, video streams, and hardware on Linux in most cases, including Mint. It is a replacement for Pulse Audio. In April 2021, Fedora Linux 34 became the first Linux distribution to ship Pipewire for audio by default. Now that's a little over 2 years ago. That's impressive how quickly the adoption has gone. A year later, Pop! OS adopted it as the default audio server in version 22.04. It was made the default audio server in Ubuntu beginning with version 22.10. In 2023, it was adopted as the default audio server for the GNOME desktop in Debian 12 Bookworm. A decision on its use in Mint has not been taken yet, although some of the components are already installed, and it's actually not that difficult to swap over this installation, which was 21.1, and I upgraded to 21.2. I also just switched over to Pipewire some months ago. I don't remember exactly when, and it's been perfectly fine. So all the pieces are there, and it wouldn't surprise me if they made that decision pretty quickly. But I don't know. I think in general, I've had better luck with Pipewire than I have with Pulse Audio in terms of audio production and video production. But I also will say that I haven't been digging as deeply into it, whereas I had been using like Jack and stuff like that alongside Pulse, and I haven't really done much of that at this point. And maybe that's just because Pipewire is better enough than Pulse that I haven't needed to. I'm not sure. Anyway, all right. Well, that's the news. Let's go ahead and move on. In security and privacy, we have an article from us.
Google Chrome's IP protection is privacy washing. This comes from the Proton VPN blog. Last month, Google launched a new feature for Chrome called IP protection that makes it easier for the company to spy on you. No surprise, since this is Google's business model, but what's concerning is that Google is marketing this as a privacy feature. More and more, Google is using privacy washing, a form of false advertising designed to trick people into thinking their products are private. Before IP protection, there was, quote, enhanced ad privacy, end quote, another Chrome feature designed to trap you inside Google's surveillance network to the exclusion of other companies. The idea behind IP protection is much the same. It shields your computer's IP address from other websites while passing all your web traffic through a server owned by Google. This gives Google a god's eye view of every website you visit at all times while using Chrome, whether you're logged into your Google account or not. There is zero privacy benefit to IP protection in its current form. There is zero privacy benefit to IP protection in its current form, and we strongly recommend people do not enable it. Other privacy advocates are also raising the alarm. Developers reviewing the code base have strongly criticized Google. Criticism of Google Chrome IP protection, quote, this doesn't have anything to do with security, end quote, one developer wrote. Quote, this is all about control, harvesting data, and ensuring Google's position as the advertising leader on the internet, end quote. Google's competitive advantage is its highly targeted advertising, with 80% of its $224 billion in revenue coming from ads. These ads are only valuable so long as Google knows all about your interests from your searches and browsing activity. As the world's most popular web browser, Chrome is Google's window on billions of people, particularly when combined with other data sources such as Google Search or Google Maps. If you're logged into your Google account, for example, to access your Gmail, the company can then associate all your searches with your account. The company has ways to track you even if you're using incognito mode. This is why IP protection is a sham. In its initial stage of development, Google Chrome is using its own proxy server to generate a temporary IP address to conceal your real IP address from a list of specific websites that Google owns. To enable IP protection at this stage, you must opt in. In future stages, Google says it may add a second proxy server operated by another company. The second hop, as they call it, would only see the temporary IP address from the first server and the website you plan to visit. This other company is supposedly independent, but Google would presumably choose a provider and define its policies. The two-hop system may look like a privacy benefit, except that Google already has numerous other ways to track you. Google sees your search history, Google Analytics, your Chrome history, cookies in its ad network, mobile location, inbox, calendar, and on and on. What's the point of a second privacy layer when Google can monitor your activity in so many other ways? IP protection is about two things: privacy washing and building a moat. Google wants to convince you its service is private while simultaneously collecting your intimate data and preventing competitors from doing the same. IP protection walls off your data from the rest of the internet while sealing Google's surveillance apparatus on your side of the wall. The article continues at the link provided with various ways to enhance your protection, mostly through the use of Proton tools.
Yeah, this isn't even the extent of what Google is doing to, control basically your entire internet experience. I know we had mentioned Google pulling stuff earlier, and this is not even the specific item that I was referencing then, because they're also planning on borking your ability to use an ad blocker, and in some ways they already have. And
I have noticed that Google Maps used to be maps.google.com. If you go to Google Maps now, it's google.com/maps, which means it's on the same server as all the other Google products instead of on its own server. And so all your data is shared all across the Google platform instead of just being included in the very invasive maps.
Yeah, it does make it more difficult without that specificity, that's for sure. Now, this just goes to a larger issue of so few tech companies controlling so much of our lives, from not only the end user facing browser that we use, that's our interaction point, but also hosting all of the back end of all of this stuff, not only their own technologies, but providing data center services for all of the other services that we use and products that we purchase. And Amazon is an absolute monopoly. Google is an absolute monopoly. Apple is an absolute monopoly. And all of them continue to consolidate power. And this is yet another way that Google is entrenching itself and siphoning in more and more data ostensibly to sell you stuff. But at the end of the day, it is they know way, way, way too much about all of us. And it's completely irresponsible that our governments continue to let them operate the way they do. And, it's just too much. It's too much power. I've been a Google user for 2 decades,
Everybody has in one way or another.
and I'm finally at the point where I'm just like, I have to get off of their stuff. Like, and I know that there's no real escape. I know exactly. There's no real escape from this. I get that. But I at least have to fool myself into believing that I'm trying. I have to feel like I'm at least making an effort, because at this point, I'm just afraid for what the future holds, because unfettered capitalism, monopolistic concentration of power, wealth, and influence, and all these things are happening, and nobody seems to really care or do much about it. I do have some hope that I've seen some younger people make comments about, well, if it's free, nothing's free. Like, I've heard, younger kids say that, like, there's no such thing as free. I love that. And that's good. That's at least planting some seeds. But
if you are not the customer, you are the product.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's nowhere I can't, there's no end to this rant, but every time I see another story like this, it's just one more, chink in the armor of freedom and personal liberty.
On a positive note, I think that the fact that we talk about these things, the fact that we are delivering this as a news article, not from the standpoint that this is some fantastic new feature that is going to be on your web browser. We're indeed talking about it as a thing that we should be concerned about, and we should educate ourselves about and make responsible decisions, knowing that this kind of speaks to a much larger picture. And I think that there are enough people that are aware and concerned about these things that we have alternatives.
And look, if you trust Google, then okay. I mean, because all this is passing the trust from your ISP getting the information to just Google getting the information. So if you trust them, okay, have fun.
Well, the reason I cut the last half of the article is basically all it is from that point on is promoting Proton and their tools. And they're very good tools, but I don't think we should be advertising for them either.
No, I agree.
They're not paying us.
This was honestly the important part of the article.
And this change, it doesn't matter if you're using a VPN or not, because the software that you're using, that you're putting the URL in, that is handling your links and your traffic, that's the point at which they're capturing it, not after you've already made that request to some other server,
right?
Where encryption would help you.
If you're logged into an account, your VPN doesn't matter. Your information is still going to Google. Even the way it stands now, without this, these protocols that they're putting into place, the IP protection that they're adding. If you are on a VPN and you log into any of your accounts, then everything you do is attached back to you.
Yep. They just see a different IP address. That's all. Yeah. It doesn't make a difference. So the only thing in that case is
most of the
maybe your
Proton tools also encrypt the stuff. So that's
yeah,
a different level.
Yeah. Anyway, we're not going to solve the world's problems on this one. I just think it's a good thing that we continue to bring these types of news stories out.
We could do it in a weekend.
Or Bill could.
Yeah. Right.
We'll just route everything through the mintCast servers over at Bill's house.
We'll put these things.
And we know he put those together in just 20 minutes or less.
Actually, we're going to get Bill fired up with a mobile data center. We're going to get him on the road.
Could you imagine how much fun Bill would have with that?
Yeah. Yep.
What, managing it from the road? If it was
no, your truck is a mobile data center.
Oh, You know, I've been talking to the Starlink people because they've got a mobile package. It's $1,200 worth of gear that you have to buy, but once you have it, you got proper
And all
broadband.
your data goes to Elon Musk instead of Google.
He don't know what to do with my data. It'll
This
all
is
be
true.
Greek to him.
This is
Why
true.
don't we go wandering somewhere?
Let's do that.
Sounds good. All right. Bi-weekly wonderings. First up, Bill.
Oh yeah, me. Yay. Okay, so work around the holidays for me is either a mad dash or a complete standstill, and you can expect both of those things within a single week. Um, Usually, I don't experience the same kinds of freight slowdowns as other drivers do at certain times of the year, mostly due to the wide level of diversity my company has in terms of the different types of freight. We're not a general purpose freight chasing dry van company. Rather, we utilize dry vans, end dumps, roll offs, flatbeds, lowboys, drop decks, and even the occasional tank trailer. And to that list, I'll also add open top tin trailers that are used for hauling scrap metal. Um, we have a specialized place in the industry, which for the driver that can do all of those things, steady income is certain. I
You got your
realized
hazmat cert?
I do, but I have not needed it in years. Um, it's almost been kind of a waste because it's a bit of a faff to do because you've got to go get vetted by TSA and then
No, I had to get my hazmat cert back in the day.
and every time you go to get your license renewed, you got to get re-vetted and all that crap. And it's unless your company requires it, it's almost not even worthwhile. But I do it just because companies come and go, so much. I want to make sure that I'm marketable. Anyway, I realized early on that if I was to be successful at this line of work, it would be wise to widen my skill set. I'm glad I did because we do have people who only do one or two things, and they tend to suffer a bit during certain times of the year. Um, and in fact, we had a bit of a layoff during the COVID thing, which took out 3/4 of the guys working there, and I was able to work, never missed a beat through that whole thing. Christmas shopping tends to be a thing that occupies my mind during this time of year. In recent years, it was put on the back burner, meaning we waited till the last minute, which caused undue stress for my wife and I and made it difficult to get the things we know everybody wants. This year, we're happy to report that at the time of writing this, which was Black Friday, we are at about 85%. And I'd say now, at recording time on Sunday, we're probably at about 90% done with all the shopping. Well, okay, 90% of the stuff that you always got one or two people that you forget about until the last minute. And then it's like you got to like run out and deal with that. There's no sense in adding that to the number because nobody ever thinks about it till the last minute. But we're completely done with all the big ticket items that are part of that list, and those are all wrapped and ready for the big day. This is in stark contrast to last year when by this same time we hadn't purchased a single gift. I think it was not until maybe a week into December that we even got started for one reason or another. On a less positive note, we had a holiday incident that I'm struggling a bit to explain and cope with. Um, on the last episode of Linux OTC, I say we, had a conversation about iMessage and the confusion caused at times by the way Android based phones will spell out the reactions made by people sending messages from iMessage onto iPhones. This was particularly relevant to me given that only one day or so earlier during a group text consisting of my brother, my sister in law, my sister, my brother in law, and 9 of my nieces and nephews, in addition to my two oldest sons, as well as my wife and I, the information going back and forth got so confusing uh, because my brother and sister-in-law and most of his kids are iPhone users, and they go mad with the silly iMessage reactions. They send it goes back and forth with everything that they say, and it got a couple of us kind of confused. Um, I was only mad aware of the mix-up toward the end of the week. As interesting as all that is, what happened on Thursday, Thanksgiving Day, is what worries me about my own mental health. So, upon learning Thanksgiving was indeed on and scheduled for Black Friday, meaning it was literally going to be Friday, I immediately had to reschedule the annual Three Fat Truckers Black Friday dinner, which is held at a place called Bill's Steakhouse up in Bronson, Michigan. We had to reschedule that for Saturday
That explains a
because,
lot.
yeah, well, we had to reschedule that for Saturday because Thanksgiving was going to be on Friday. Um, so the whole thing was well and truly in my head as far as what day everything was going to fall on. Or at least that's what I thought. Somehow my mind got things mixed up. We cooked all the food for Thanksgiving and took it to my brother's house on Thursday and arrived at his house at about 4 p.m. to find no one there. I texted to ask where everybody was, and it was at that moment I experienced the total recall when it all just floods in. When you have that complete memory return and you realize how stupid you just were. I had a cooler full of ice and beer, um, which at the time of writing this was still in the back of my pickup truck. Funny thing, it's not there anymore. Um, it was getting a little bit chilly there at the time, so I I did not lose the ice or the beer, so that was good. Um, it kind of what makes the whole thing even more strange is that my wife, a person who never screws up a schedule, also got the day wrong. Her family had Thanksgiving on Thursday, and we completely blew off her family because we thought my family was on Thursday. Uh, I got it in my head. I may get my head scanned in the near future, and I'll report the findings as soon as they're made available. But that really
Can they
kind of
read
bothered
anything
me.
in a vacuum?
You know, it
Thank you, Moss.
really,
That was beautiful. That was brilliant. I was going to go for the. I didn't know you owned your own steakhouse, Bill.
yeah, it's been doing great. It's been there about 60 years, which
Huh?
is really interesting because I'm only 50.
No, you
Um,
bought it 60 years ago
bought it 60 years ago,
on
and
your -10 birthday.
my negative 10th birthday, I would give or take. And they do great. But we go up there, and all the people that have anything to do with Three Fat Truckers meets up there for that Black Friday dinner, and we have a lot of fun. Two people, two people, you're looking at about $150 for two people to eat there, and we took my daughter, which meant it was about closer to $175. But we only do it once a year, so it wasn't that big of a
So
deal.
almost the same price as McDonald's anymore.
Yeah, but basically, yeah. Okay, so that's I've been trying to put that out of my head the last couple days. Okay, so the company Focusrite, the makers of the Scarlett line of professional audio interfaces, has released their fourth generation line of gear. And I know this sounds like a news article, but I've been using their third generation solo audio interface for slightly less than a year and have loved it, which is to say, it hasn't given me any problems. I've tried cheaper interfaces and have been frustrated by the cheap USB B plugs that connect the device to the computer, frequently shorting out on me. I had that problem. Moss had that problem, and I just didn't want to deal with it anymore. So I went with the more expensive Scarlett because it uses the more modern USB-C interface, which seems to be more reliable for just about everything.
And he even bought me one.
Yep, Moss has one, and I think he's gone on well with it. As I wrote here, I think Moss can attest to some of the frustrations we've had in the past with the older ones. The Solo is great, but this time I decided to go with the 2i2, which is the next model up from the Solo, offering the ability to connect two XLR microphone inputs. The 2i2 literally means two in, two out. Um, this may become useful in the future because I've had a couple of people say they would like to come to my little studio I got down here to do interviews for Three Fat Truckers. In addition to more inputs, the 2i2 also offers another audio enhancing feature to add a bit of dimension to the sound. Um, all Scarlett devices have a feature called Air, which is an enhancement to add clarity to voice signal offered. Uh, the 2i2 offers two levels of that enhancement to add clarity to voice of multiple registers, perhaps meaning one setting may be better for somebody of a higher register of voice, while the other will be a better choice for somebody with a lower register. I'm enjoying the new interface, though at first it wasn't quite the case. The main reason I bought this thing is because the XLR inputs are in the back of it, which makes the cable management a little bit easier, a little bit neater on my desk here. But when I first plugged it in, and Eric was there when I first fired it up, it was the 2i2 is interpreted by Pulse Audio as a multi-channel input device, which at first I believed only meant that the unit has two XLR inputs, though I now know that that's not the case. What confused me at first was that the unit was looping my output back into the input, which sounds okay at first, but it meant everything I was hearing was looped back around and sent through my microphone feed. I first learned this when I was trying to have a pre-show conversation with Eric and Leo. They were hearing their own voices echoing back. I couldn't figure it out quickly, so I hooked the Solo back up so that we could record OTC. After the show, I took the time to figure it out. Turns out the device is made to do that, so the audio from an application can be incorporated into the recording of another application. So if I wanted to play audio from, I don't know, like an audio player or something, it can be looped back, excuse me, back into Audacity on a hardware level. Um, but let's see, I can I can see the use for this, but it's not likely that I'll be that it'll be anything I will use. Sorry. These devices are made for Windows and Mac, meaning the software that comes with these devices is written for Windows and Mac. That's not always going to be the case. Somebody is working on a Linux port right now, but I don't think it's like fit for purpose yet. It turns out that if you go to PavView Control, which once again, which is not installed on Mint by default, I might add, and hit the button to expand the channel volume sliders in the input tab, you'll find there's indeed 4 individual volume sliders labeled front left, front right, rear left, rear right. It is the rear channels which supply the loop feed, and a simple sliding of the level all the way to the left does away with the loopback sound completely. All is well with the universe. There is currently, as I said, an effort to port the Scarlett control software to Linux, which is likely to succeed, but at the time of writing this, is not available yet. I mean, I say it's not available. You can get it on GitHub, and you can, if you know how to make it work, you can get it installed and be a part of the testing process, but it's not like available. It's something you can just install from the Software Center or whatever. The one thing about the Easy Start with these devices, if you just hook them up, your computer will identify them as mass storage devices. and you need the software that they come with that you download from Focusrite to turn off the easy start and enable the full power of the device, but also stop it from running in um, mass storage mode, because it's meant to like bring you up a little folder that's got the shortcut to their easy start where you download their software and all that, which is easily handled with a virtual machine. You just pass through the USB to that virtual machine and download the software and run it. And it from that software you can change it from the 48 megahertz that it's set to default to the 44.1 megahertz, which is a better idea for doing audio recording. Um, and also, that's how it does firmware upgrading. So, beyond that, though, once that's done, you can shut the virtual machine off, and it works just fine with Linux. Or you can just hook it up and run it, and it should be okay. I think, Moss, you've never hooked yours to Windows and enabled anything, have you? Oh, I made him go away. Anyway, that's about all I've got. How about you, Joe?
Well, it's been a busy week at work, a couple weeks actually. Always is this time of year with all the work-related parties and people going on vacation and all the comp days due to holidays. It has made things a little bit hectic, especially since we lost another person on second shift, leaving us with only two for the second shift. This means that I'm probably going to be working a lot of split shifts where I start out working in the mornings, take 4 hours off, and then turn around and work some more. And we're probably going to have to put into place a second shift rotation. So that's going to make some of my first shift guys very unhappy that they have to switch to second shift for a week or two, especially the ones with kids. But I was able to get some things worked on. Previously, I had print out like full over-the-ear headphones, and that worked out pretty well. I think it was the Armadillo from Thingiverse, but I wasn't completely satisfied with the result. I have started designing my own that provides a bit more and possibly adjustable clamping force. And also, it will have a channel through the middle to run wires through, so I'm not coming off both sides like this particular one is. Now, I was also able to get my hands on a little mini 7-inch screen that is HDMI, and I was able to put on a frame for it, and then I was able to mount a little stand on the back of it. It didn't come out as well as I would have liked with the 3D printing and the M3 screws, but it has come together, and I was able to get a structure together for a stand. I don't know if I'm going to be able to redo that to make it so that I can put it on a spring clip, but I would like to give that a try so that I can move it around. Now, I've already tested it with an adapter, and it works with DeX and my phone. Hopefully allow me to do some more intensive testing in the near future with some of the remote access stuff that I already have set up in regards to DeX and with DeX in general. And I also do want to redo the frame for it and maybe mount the adapters directly to the frame to save on the wiring nightmare that it becomes, and just have the USB-C accessible instead of the HDMI and the USB micro. And maybe also have a couple of extra USB ports exposed. But then again, I would need the other port, the HDMI port specifically exposed if I want to be able to use it as a test screen for Raspberry Pis. That is, if I need something smaller than the screen that I already have set up, which doesn't have the greatest resolution, and honestly, the 7-inch screen looks better. I also found another reason why the bed on my printer was not staying level on the first layer. I thought that it might be some play on the X arm, causing it to move up and down unevenly, and I guess it kind of was, but it was not because it was loose. It was because the mount for the Z motor, where the Z rod is connected, that actually pushes the X arm up and down, was working itself loose, and the entire assembly that holds it into place was moving up and down. After I tightened it, it worked a lot better for a while, and then I had to tighten it again. I also want to maybe use some Loctite in the future, but that will make it more difficult to take it apart and maintenance it. I also ended up needing to lube the Z-Rod to even out the occasional stutter that it had. I didn't have the proper oil handy, so I ended up using some WD-40 for now. I know that's not a good idea, but I didn't have anything else handy. I am still looking for my sewing machine oil, and will give it a proper clean and lube later. And that's really all I've been up to. Boss?
Okay. You were fading out on me the last couple lines. I hope it's just on my end. I've taken a few days off to take...
I hope it's just you too.
I've taken... Okay, well, I'll start it a third time then. I've taken a few days off work to take my wife to various pre-surgical appointments, plus the days off due to the holidays. We got Distro Hopper's Digest done by Miracle and Magic. That's Dale Miracle and Eric Magic. Should be released any day now. I'm currently on Full Circle... and I'm current on Full Circle Weekly News. Should have a new file to work on today or tomorrow. We've had a whole lot of stressful things going on, some due to the holidays, some due to my work, a lot due to my wife's upcoming knee surgery and the possible expense thereof. I barely held myself together some days, and others, well, let's just be glad I have forgiving friends. I wanted to get a Pine Tab 2, but noticed they have loaded it with a beta version of an Arch distro I've never heard of, and $279 was a bit steep for that. I guess I'm sticking with my Fire HD8 for now. We're still looking at upgrading phones, but we'll wait until after the surgery and we find out how many more thousands of dollars we will have to pay. Right now, we're leaning toward the Pixel 7. Oddly, the cheaper 7a is not cheaper when it's used. I do not know if the 7a is a better phone, but everyone's rating the 7 as the top-rated used phone right now.
No, it's just newer, that's all. They released the 7 first, and then they released the 7.
Yeah.
So the 7 was $100 less than the 7A was $100 less than the 7 when it was released.
That's just duration. That's all you're seeing this time.
Okay. And to be completely honest, they are pretty much exactly the same. My sister has a 7A, my son has a 7, and apart from the fact that the 7 is slightly bigger than the 7A, they're pretty much exactly the same phone, really.
I've not had any reason to even pick up my guitars, except I guess I played a little bit for Eric before Distro Hoppers the other day. And nobody's been serious about buying the 3 I have for sale. Ditto for my computers. I said computers plural. I guess I still only really have the Z800 workstation left for sale. I got a book to review for Full Circle magazine. It was on Raspberry Pi. They assigned that to me. I thought I might be able to get to do new users in the Linux book, but no, they assigned me the Raspberry Pi book. I was a tad disappointed when it arrived. It has a 2017 copyright, and it only covers the Pi 3. But on the positive side, the only Raspberry Pi I can find right now is my Pi 3B, so I'll give it a shot. I am supposing that once I get the review done, it will be published in Full Circle magazine and probably passed on to the publisher. That's it for me. What about you, Majid?
So I've actually had a reasonably quiet fortnight. The last mintCast that we did was the day before my 24-hour shift, and I was expecting it to be an absolute nightmare. And there was no work. There was no work to do after 6 o'clock in the evening, and I went home, and there was nothing to do, and I didn't get called back in. So I mean, stranger things have happened, I suppose. I felt quite lucky. Maybe I should have bought a lottery ticket or something. Anyway, the first week after that, basically, it was just basically meetings and admin. While the second week has been a lot more clinical, with most of my time in the operating room, doing quite a wide variety of operations this week. Actually, a lot of different subspecialties. For reasons which I can only put down to capitalism, in the UK here, we do Black Friday and Cyber Monday, even though we don't actually do Thanksgiving. Amazon has really pushed this over the last 5, 6 years. And normally, this is a time where I buy even more unnecessary technology. This time, I've been relatively restrained. I mean, I've been tempted to get a new television, mainly because I went to my cousin's and he had bought a 65-inch OLED Samsung TV for like 1.5 grand. I think it was a kind of almost like a sympathy purchase because
You had TV envy?
no, well, I had TV envy, but I know why he bought it. He bought it because he's going through a lot of crap at the minute with his ex, and I think he just wanted to treat himself. So he bought that, and then when I went round to his house and saw it, I was like, "Damn, that's a good television." So I started looking around myself to see. Okay, I haven't got 1.5 grand to spend, but maybe there'll be some good deal on Black Friday. I actually realized that nowadays I watch most of my content on my tablet. I mean, I've got this Samsung Galaxy Tab S8 with a 12-inch screen, and it has a really good OLED display. I've been watching Silo and Monarch on it at the minute, and I therefore thought, well, actually, if I do buy a TV, it's really going to be a bit superfluous, really. I don't, I mean, obviously, you don't need a lot of this stuff anyway, but actually, I prefer the kind of, as I said, lying in my bed watching my tablet. I did, however, buy some stuff though, because it can't be Black Friday without me buying something. And I went for a Meta Quest 2. So, people who are well in with the news would know that there is the MetaQuest 3 was released about a month or so ago. And so, unsurprisingly, they've got big discounts on the MetaQuest 2 since it's the older model. And so, I got it for about £200, which is a good deal, I thought, considering it was originally out for about 350. It's been a long time since I've used VR. I remember having a couple of Google Cardboard type devices. I even had the Samsung Gear VR, with the one where you'd put your Galaxy S6 into the visor. So it's obviously really advanced a lot in that time. It's quite disorientating as well. My daughter loves it so far. I also quite like the fact that even if I don't want to play any games or anything, I can just put on Netflix or YouTube, and I feel like I'm in a cinema hall or something like that. So if nothing else, I think that's a good
That
use
is
for it.
100% the reason that I would get a modern, because I had the same as you. I had the Gear View or whatever the Samsung thing was,
Gear VR, yeah.
and it was awful. The resolution just wasn't good enough.
Yeah,
You know what
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah.
And there was like light bleed and stuff. So anyway, I could imagine. But the one thing that I loved in there was the YouTube View and Netflix, and just like you're right, it was like sitting in my own personal cinema. It was amazing.
I actually really enjoyed the Gear VR, and I was disappointed that it didn't continue forward
Mm, yeah,
after
definitely.
the Note 10. But no, I definitely enjoyed it for like Netflix and things. But the only problem with VR is that if you're watching a movie or playing a game or anything like that, the problem is that you can't interact with the people around you,
Yeah,
and 3 kids, the wife, and yeah, I don't get enough time with them as it is.
I
So
yeah.
mean, surely that sounds like a selling point, actually.
No, no, I get it. Even with
No, but I get that as
headphones,
well.
I feel that way too. Like if I had my earbuds in and my wife walks in, I'll usually pause whatever's on because I feel like it's rude. So I can
Yeah,
imagine being in a VR headset and having her like tooling around.
yeah. I mean, my wife. Interesting you mentioned about earbuds. Actually, my wife has told me that whenever I use my earbuds, I have to tell everybody because they won't notice. that I'll be, I don't know, sitting in the sitting on the sofa, whatever, with my earphones in and listening to whatever, and they'll come and they'll talk to me and then walk off again, thinking I'm listening. And so
That,
my wife,
that's
yeah,
that's why I only use one side.
yeah. So that's why. So I have been told that every time I use it, I have to tell people that I'm using it, which
That's funny.
yeah, it is, isn't it? I mean,
It's a
God,
good rule. Hey, it's fair. It is.
it is
Anyway,
fair,
all
I
right.
suppose. Yeah. Anyway, I had a really good episode of Linux OTC last week. There were some very spirited discussions. Seems that Leo likes his Apple stuff, and after that discussion and the kind of the after party discussion, shall we say, on Discord about all that, it made me reflect on a couple of my own choices, and I came to a slightly startling conclusion. I think I like the canonical way rather than the Apple way. What I mean by that is that Canonical, the guys behind Ubuntu, make some big calls on the way that they want to present Ubuntu and Linux in general. They've got GNOME 3, they've got Snaps, etc., etc. In a sense, it's no different to Apple making decisions for the user as well. However, there's a lot more agency when you're using Ubuntu. You don't like GNOME? Well, you've got different desktop environments available. You don't like Snap? You can install Flatpak, etc. You can follow their way and their kind of presets if you like. And if you don't like a particular thing, you can do something else, and that it still means that there is a little more cohesion to the end to the end product, but with the ability to do what you want. Whilst, for example, I feel, as someone who, as I said, did try iOS and Mac over the last 18 months, that there were too many choices that were being made, and for me, if there was anything that I didn't like, I couldn't easily change. And so, anywho, as I said, I'm not trying to say I'm some kind of canonical fanboy. I'm not. I'm just trying to say that whilst I understand that a big company will want to have its vision of whatever it has, one which is more freedom and open source respecting is better than one which is basically, you don't like our way, sod off, get something else. You don't like the way iMessage works, buy your mum an iPhone, etc. Speaking of Ubuntu, I've installed it on my work laptop. I had some issues around getting because it's a work laptop. I've dual booting it with Windows 11, and that had the BitLocker encryption enabled by default, and so it wouldn't initially install. But then I went off and switched off the encryption, and now it's fine. And it. I've mentioned it before. All roads for me, even when I don't want to, seem to end up on Ubuntu, or some variant thereof. Having said that, Manjaro is still on my daily driver home laptop. I'm slowly getting to grips with Arch and the AUR. In my hands, it's not as polished an experience as an Ubuntu or Debian based distro, and I'm still mulling over whether to keep it going. I do actually like Manjaro's GNOME spin. They have, tweaked it a little bit. And yeah, as I said, I'm starting to get the knack of the AUR, and I'm spending a little bit more time in the command line than I used to. It's been an interesting experiment. Whether it's something I'm going to continue doing, I don't know. I suppose the next distro hop will be to Fedora. Fedora is not something I've used significantly for a good while now. I mean, 5-6 years at least. And the reason for that has been that I remember that it didn't seem to play nice with others, to use Moss's term. If you had a dual booting kind of setup. But that was some time ago, and listening to Eric talking about Fedora on Linux tablets, which I'm sure we'll get to in a bit as well, made me think that if I'm going to try something different, the next thing I'm going to try different will probably be that. I'm recording this on my podcasting rig, and this is the first time ever, which makes me sound really sad. I know that I've actually got a multi-monitor setup going. I've I found an extra monitor that I had in the garage, and I thought, well, instead of just having it sitting there, I might as well use it. And so yeah, and I'm converted. You know, I understand entirely why people do it. It's a fantastic idea. I can't believe I didn't do it before. Outside of technology, I've been always been interested in like secret societies and clubs and all that sort of stuff. I don't know whether it's a thing about being a second generation immigrant, you know, kind of 1 foot here, 1 foot there, you know, mixed identities and stuff like that. So I was just looking around and I found out that there was a Masonic lodge a few miles from my house. So I thought, I wonder, I wonder what this whole Freemason doodah is about. You hear lots of conspiracy theories about how they rule the world and secret handshakes and all this kind of stuff. I made some inquiries and it's brought up some surprises, I must say. First surprise is that you have to answer a questionnaire before joining or asking to join. But the questionnaire has only one question, which is, do you believe in a supreme being? And if yes, then we will accept your application. And if no, sorry, we can't help you. Yet, right below that, it says, we do not discuss religion or politics within the lodge. So it's like, that's interesting. Wasn't expecting that. Anyway, the more slightly freaky thing was a couple of days later, I got an email. I get an email saying that, you know, we've looked at your application and we've passed it on to the elder or mason or whatever it is at the lodge. Now, this email was sent to me. Okay, so a bit of backstory. A while ago, you know, about 10 years or so, we, being Indians, we all have like, there isn't a consistent naming convention in our family. So people have different surnames, first names, wrong way round, this, that, and the other. So this was causing issues when it came to traveling. You know, having a name such as mine normally means that, you know, customs and visas and immigrations are always interested to know where I'm going, who I'm going with, etc., etc. Anywho, so we did did some standardization of all our surnames, so we all had the same surname. So at least that won't be an issue when we're traveling. Anyway, these guys sent me an email addressed to me in my old name. There is nothing official that has my old name on it. My passport has the new name, the driving license, my mortgage application, my bank account, my general medical council, British Medical Association. Think of something, it has the changed name that I changed by deed poll. And yet these guys sent me an email with my old name on, and that just freaked me out.
So you've been dead named by the Masons.
Well, it was kind of like,
Didn't think you were trans.
no, but the thing is like the idea. It's like all that stuff about conspiracy theories about, you know, they have deep tentacles and they know everything about you. But you know what? Maybe they do. Anyway.
Yeah, we cheap Masons never get any notice. You know.
Anywho, as I said, that brought a few surprises. I was planning on going on one of the peace demonstrations that have been going around in the UK. I've been advised that it might cause issues with work. So, unfortunately, I haven't gone. I suppose all I can do is pray for peace, and I hope everybody, yeah, just peace, man. Anyway, it's suddenly turned cold here in the UK. It's down to about 40 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 degrees Celsius. I know that's not very cold, but as I said, it kind of happened suddenly. We've been having a pretty mild autumn so far. This meant that my the car battery in my son's car died while they'd gone out shopping. I managed to go over and jumpstart it, but I think it's time to buy a separate battery pack. I've been thinking about it for ages. Then just have random jump cables and, hope that one of us is around to, start things. His car is a bit of an old car as well. I think I mentioned it. It's a Nissan Micra. It's a nice car. But yeah, I can imagine with the cold, we may well have battery issues. Anyway, I think I've gone on for long enough and rambled on for long enough in my bi-weeklies. Go on, Eric.
All right. Yeah, my wife's car, same thing. As soon as it got 20 degrees colder, the battery, it didn't completely die. Like when the heat of the day would, she didn't start it in the morning because it wouldn't. And then as it got warmer, it did. But, once a battery starts showing those signs, it's time to replace it. So funny enough, it was 2 months out of warranty. It's like they designed it to fail. 2 months out of warranty. How do they do that? Anyway, before I get started, I want to say that I now know more about Joe's Z-Rod than I ever intended to. So you never know what you're going to find out in these wonderings.
Yeah, keep your rods to yourself, Joe.
I'm
It
not
just
quite
makes it go up and down.
Sure. I'm not quite
That's what they
sure.
all say.
So I have to say, I was the last one to add my wonderings here, and I had read through all of the others because, of course, they're more prepared than I am. But I'm not quite sure how they all seem to get so much done in a fortnight, which makes me wonder, like, are they just wild overachievers, or am I the complete opposite? And so I think to
Eric,
save face,
we
I'll
didn't
just say,
spend the last 2 weeks in the hospital.
well, yeah, but still, I can get something done now. But I'll just say that I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm not an overachiever or an underachiever. I'm just surrounded by people who are more productive than I am. Oh my! Well, I did do a few things, mostly with the tablet. Not surprisingly, since we're going to talk about that in the innards. But I am still looking for the best sort of software option in terms of operating system, desktop environment. And as was referred to earlier, I had been running Fedora as well as Windows 11, so I'm dual booting the both of those. Really wasn't loving Fedora, as I may have mentioned. It just, I don't know. I've just never quite been at home in Fedora like I am on a Debian or an Ubuntu base. So I wanted to keep GNOME 45 as well as Wayland. And I thought, okay, so where do I get the latest GNOME and something that's supporting a Wayland session and has reasonably modern packages? So I went with Ubuntu 2310 and did what I normally do, which is to de-snapify it and stuff like that. But before I got to that point, I thought, okay, this is my opportunity to try something that I've been wanting to, which is Chrome OS Flex. I've only ever had one Chromebook, and it was completely awful. And really, Lenovo should be ashamed of themselves for selling it, because it was a completely unusable, just waste of electronics. Honestly, just so underpowered that I don't know who anywhere could use that thing and not literally want to throw it. It was so bad. But anyway, I returned it, and
good.
The Duet. It was a Lenovo Duet.
Yeah.
So it was like a convertible, detachable, and I got the sense that it wasn't Chrome OS, that it was just because it was just such bunk hardware. And so that's why I wanted to try Flex, because that, the premise being that this is a much more capable piece of hardware than that other one. And, so how would Chrome OS run on it? And it was Chrome OS. Google publishes a list of supported devices. And so I went out and looked, and yes, this tablet was on there. So I thought, okay, great. I'm at least, have some, likelihood that it's going to work. So I ran a backup of the disk, because I figured if I hated it, then at least I can revert back to Windows and Linux dual booting. And thankfully I'd been using Clonezilla, which was not really working well for me, and Moss had suggested using RescueZilla. I also have Fox Rescue. Someone must have suggested to me that I haven't tried yet. But anyway, RescueZilla, much better option. I made the snapshot. I tried Chrome OS Flex for about 2 days, 3 days. And, it's better than something like Android because you can at least run virtualized Linux apps, like actual desktop class apps, except that the way that they're containerized is that it's a little too aggressive for my taste. So, if you don't know what Chrome OS is, it's a lot of just basically web-centric stuff, applications. It's all driven through Chrome, not surprisingly. So things are just basically web apps, which are just wrappers, for web services, more or less, and not a lot of like true desktop class apps. So on at least some hardware, you can install a virtualized Linux environment, kind of like WSL, I guess, on Windows, but not exactly. And anyway, what I found was I had installed Firefox and Tailscale being a sort of a mesh VPN that allows me to get to different hardware when I'm not in the house. And it occurred to me that whenever I took it out, I could connect to Tailscale, except then the only things that could access it, that segment of the network, I guess, were things that were in the container. Now, is there a way to change the permissions, excuse me, change the routing? I don't know. There's probably some way to do that, but quite frankly, I wasn't ever planning on running Chrome OS as a permanent thing. I already talked about, being a little unhappy using so many Google products earlier on. So that, would have been sort of kind of hypocritical to say, oh yeah, Google's really overstepping, and then here I am installing Chrome OS on something. And honestly, the other aspect is that I got the tablet specifically to run a full version of Linux, not Android or not some sort of watered down version. I wanted a full version of Linux. So I restored the image so that I had Windows and Fedora back, and then set about switching to Ubuntu, like I mentioned, and thought that I was going to. You can actually, I don't know if people are aware of this, but if you don't like Ubuntu's changes to GNOME, you can actually install a vanilla session.
Yeah, you
And
can. Yeah, I've done that in the
yes,
past.
so basically, it just takes out all of the extensions and the I guess the Ubuntu tweaks to GNOME, and leaves you with a more or less vanilla session. And so I had done that in a virtual machine in preparation for this, and had thought, well, maybe I'll do it, maybe I won't. Once I had it on, because the tablet is used both as a laptop style with the keyboard case and the touchpad, it actually made sense to have the dock on the left. It just made it kind of easier to use like a computer. And then whenever I'm using it like a tablet, I just turn on auto hide for the dock, and then it's out of my way and I can just use it. So in the end, the Ubuntu desktop, the way it's put together, kind of made sense. And so for now, I'm just sort of leaving it that way. I alluded to removing the Snap-based apps. I don't necessarily need to remove Snapd. Just in case there's some system level thing that they do, or I have that sense that Canonical is going to assume that Ubuntu has Snapd running, but I can still at least make the choice to not use Fedora, Firefox, and Thunderbird, and other things that are snapped or running as a snap. I just don't think snaps on the desktop, at least for me, they don't work well. They seem to, and then I always run into some problem. Excuse me. And whether that's the containerization and the fact that it is, so locked down, or, there's something with the theming. There's something, yeah, that's actually what it was this time. I wanted to use a different cursor. So if you're using just the default Yarrow cursor on Ubuntu, it's fine. It matches. The Snap app is using the same cursor, but if you switch to a different cursor, you install a different one. All of a sudden now Snap doesn't know what to do, and it's using this terrible little cursor, and you can't get it to switch. And I'm sure there's a way to do it, but I'm not going to spend my time trying to get that stuff to work. Whereas if I'd use a Flatpak, wow, it's like magic. It just understands that it's supposed to integrate with the desktop and use what the desktop's using. And so I know that's probably a minor thing for a lot of people, but that kind of stuff just annoys the hell out of me. And so I can't deal with it. And so,
I think
so
that
those
annoys
have
a lot of people when you've got like a window and you're traveling from one window to another on the same desktop, and your cursor changes on you going across those windows.
right.
That is irritating.
Yeah.
It's interesting actually because when I was saying that earlier that I'd installed Ubuntu on my work laptop, I put on 2310 as well, and I agree with you actually. Having used 23.10 on a touchscreen device, I actually find that the dock and the way that they've done it is actually quite useful and quite helpful, rather than having a completely stock GNOME. I decided that I would give Canonical the benefit of the doubt, and I would use the Snap apps that they had. And I downloaded what I wanted to in Snap, and then found that there was a bug which has been put on OMG Ubuntu actually, that whilst you can still download and install debs from the command line, the new app center that they have doesn't support it. I mean, the old software center did, but the new one, which they've rewritten in Flutter, doesn't. And so I then had to install GDebi, which is a graphical, I think it's an elementary app actually, a graphical way of installing debs, which is what I did. And then anyway, more perusal of the Snap store made me realize that it doesn't have as many apps in it compared to FlatHub. So I then thought, well, you know what? Why not just install GNOME software, and then enable FlatHub, and so I now have a Snap-based software center in the App Center, and I also now have GNOME software to download and install Flatpaks as well. And I think, and this goes back to my point earlier that I was saying about, if you don't like a decision that's been made by Canonical, it's pretty easy to adjust it to what you would like on Linux, on Ubuntu, etc., in a way that it's not as easy to do on, say, either Mac OS, iOS, Windows, even to an extent. But yeah, the other one I just wanted to mention, when you're talking about Chrome OS, using a Chrome OS device and not using Google software is kind of like going to a steakhouse and wanting to have the vegetarian option. You kind of miss the point. And actually, to then go and then say, well, I want to run Linux apps, in virtualized containers, is like going to said steakhouse and asking for the vegan options. Yeah. The reason I say this is because I have been exactly in that same position. I've done exactly that same thing, and it's trying to put Firefox on. I had a Chromebook which my son used to use, which I've sold on now, but I used to use it for him because I wanted to monitor what he was doing. And anyway, I remember when I had figured out how to put Linux apps on and this, that, and then I thought, why is this so janky? It's like, because it's supposed to be janky. You're not supposed to do this. Anyway, I just thought I'd just add that in.
Yeah, I think the ability to add a Linux app is really a stopgap. I don't think they intend and also on a fully sanctioned Chromebook, you can run Android apps as well, which I think also fills some of that gap, which you can't do on Flex. Anyway, the last thing I had is the battery on this I got it with about 60% health left, and I'm only getting a few hours of runtime on a charge. I wish Linux was better optimized for battery use, because by comparison, the Windows side of things, I get about 40 to 50% more battery life. I don't know how or why, what they do, because it doesn't seem like they necessarily throttle back the processor performance or speed. The brightness isn't all the way down. The normal things that you would expect are not uh, impacted the way you would expect on basically in Linux, where they're like, oh, well, turn your screen brightness down, or throttle your processor, or all the things that make it no fun to use anymore. So it's something I want to touch on in the innards, just basically how Linux seems to be pretty terrible at battery performance. And there are some things you can try, which I have tried, but are not, they just don't cover the same ground apparently that other desktop operating systems seem to cover. So anyway, because the battery is only 60%, I think I'm going to replace it when I get the chance or whatever, and just that'll give me an extra, instead of 2 hours, I'll probably get 3.5 or something like that, which will be much more acceptable using it as a tablet. Because if I want to watch a whole movie, or if I want to take it with me and not have to deal with charging, that kind of stuff. So, but otherwise, yeah, still loving the tablet, loving the hardware, loving playing around with software, and it has been a really wonderful bargain, in my opinion, for the money I spent for it. So, but let's go ahead and move on. All right, Linux innards. We want to talk about tablets, and specifically Linux on tablets, and people's experience with that. It seems like there may be some slight renewed interest. We have manufacturers making new devices, and that's great. And I wonder if they're able to solve some of these issues, as I was kind of talking about. But I want to just sort of touch on, what's out there in terms of Linux and how things work with a touch interface, different things like that. So, yeah, I think let's actually start there in terms of Linux in the desktop environments or window managers that are available. The ones that actually take touch into account, I think the most obvious one is probably GNOME. Just simply because they have, the layout is such that it's kind of friendly towards that, where things are sort of full screen by default. They have gestures. Yeah, hot corners, gestures.
I think Gnome was. I think I might have mentioned it before. They were very early on in this game when it came to touch. Gnome 3 came out when 2011, 2012, around that time. This around the same time that Windows was thinking about. Windows was
The
having
Metro
Windows,
UI,
the Metro UI. Ubuntu had come up with the Unity desktop environment. However, if you look at actually most of the desktop environments nowadays, they do have improved support, shall we put it that way, for touch. So the latest Cinnamon has a few more touch-friendly aspects. KDE, I know, definitely does. So it is something I think that the other desktop environments are kind of because of the increased proliferation of convertible devices, of tablets, of two-in-ones, yoga tablets, like convertibles type things. So I do think that a lot of them are looking in, have started doing a bit, but I would agree 100% that I think GNOME really is what works really well as a touch, definitely as a touch enabled interface, and probably also as a touch only interface as well. If you have a tablet without the keyboard and things like that, it does fundamentally work. I think also the part of the other reason why there's I don't know if I want to call it a renewed interest, but also the fact that it's kind of coming a bit more to the fore is that we have now had a significant period of Windows tablets. that have been going around, based on an x86 architecture. And of course, if it's x86, it's basically the same as any other desktop or laptop, and you can put Linux on it. So the barrier to putting on a different distro is much easier and quicker. And because Linux is more performant in general compared to Windows, it means that, like, the device you're talking about, Eric, for $200 you've got what, an 8th gen i5, was it? 8
Yeah.
gigs of RAM, all that sort of stuff. That kind of stuff. Linux is just going to fly on that anyway.
But like Erica said, you are losing those battery optimizations. So you can
Yeah.
expect your battery to work about half as long as it does on a Windows system.
And
Yeah.
so this is where the kind of the dichotomy comes as to what people use tablets for compared to what people use laptops for. I mean, this Apple's been on about this for ages, isn't it? What the computer, their iPad stuff.
You
But
mean like putting an M1 chip in a iPad Pro and then gimping it with iPad OS?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the point being that you made an interesting point about, well, it's only got 60% battery or battery health left, so I've only got a couple of hours, and if I'm watching a video, that completely destroys it. When you think about it, what do most people who have, say, iPads or Android tablets, I would say 50% of the time it's for watching video. I have one. I've got a Samsung one which has decks, and I can do all sorts of stuff. What do I really do? I sit and watch television on it. And the screen's fantastic as well. And so what then happens is a OS which is designed for normal computing, which may allow tablet type interface modalities to work, doesn't actually work as well in the stuff that you'd use a tablet for. If you want to sit and watch the latest series on Netflix, or for example, you might only watch one episode and your battery's dead, as an example. One of the advantages of tablets like the Android and iPad ecosystem, which are on ARM, is the fact that they have much longer battery life. And the fact that, yes, you can watch something, put your tablet down, go off, do whatever you want. 2 days later, you might open it up again, and yes, you've lost some battery, but the thing still works. I've tried that actually so I used to have about two actually, a Lenovo Mix series tablets, which are they're like Surface clones, with the keyboard and a pen and all that sort of jazz. And yeah, if I started using that in that way, I'll put it on again, it'd be on 5% battery. Because it's just taken so much battery just lying there idle, because that's the way the processor is. I think with some of the other pain points, and which has been alluded to a little bit in the show notes, that you get with Linux devices, apart from what we mentioned about battery, is the general jank. So pen input, for example, the Surface clone that I had, I kept a Windows partition on it because Windows 10 and now Windows 11 works quite well with styluses. And if you are the type of person that makes lots of handwritten notes, which I am actually, or signs documents and things like that, I found that using those on Linux just wasn't as good. Now, obviously, you might say, well, of course, it's not going to be as good. But again, that's one of the things you're using a tablet for, isn't it? It's not your laptop, because if it was your laptop, you'd just use your laptop. On-screen keyboards, on the other hand, have got much better, I feel. I think the newest Ubuntu one is a lot better compared to what it used to be in the past. I don't know how you're finding the on-screen keyboard on yours, Eric.
It's definitely better than the Plasma one. And other desktop environments and window managers don't even have one. So the fact that whenever I tap an input field, it opens a keyboard. Now, the keyboard itself is very basic and very bare bones. That's fine. I mean, it works, but it definitely doesn't feel like the type of thing that I could sit there and do anything meaningful with other than literally just inputting a couple words. It's just too rudimentary. I
Is
would
that
like to
something that can
see.
be switched out and with something else? Is it modular like that?
Well, I was actually going to ask that. I mean, yes, I went on GitHub and I just sort of did a search for on-screen keyboard and tried to narrow down, and there
Now,
didn't seem to be. Go ahead, Joe.
the onboard from that is built into Cinnamon is actually quite adjustable so that it can be like a full keyboard. But the more you add to the keyboard, of course, the smaller the keys are,
Right.
and
Well, and I'm
it
not
does
going to
make it
be
more
typing
used.
a novel. I just so what I like is having the symbol support under the keys so that I can just long press, or there's just certain like basic on-screen keyboard conventions that Android, that iOS, that they all just sort of share. I'm not looking for text predication. I'm not looking necessarily for spelling support, or I don't really expect any of those refinements because there just aren't enough people using it. But it would be nice to have some of the sort of standard features that I use in Android, for instance. Like, it would be awesome if you could just take an Android keyboard and port it over and use it. I don't know if that's even possible. These are all things that I'm making my way toward. I kind of feel comfortable now on Ubuntu, at least for the moment. The battery life seems to be 15% better than Fedora, so that's something. I would love to find some more optimizations to sort of tweak that a little. If I get a new battery, and that kind of gives me a little extra longevity. So I'm sort of, feeling my
Well,
way through. Go ahead.
something Majid was talking about was the different things that other systems do to like shut down and save battery over a couple of days. One thing that I found really helpful on the Dell Latitude was in installing and making it so that I could use one of the hibernate modes. So that
Hmm,
way, if I left my keyboard for a few minutes, it would completely shut down. But then once I started it back up again, it would come back from memory.
gotcha.
So it does mean you have to change how you do the what's it called, the page file,
Hmm.
and then it has to be at least equal to the size of your RAM. So that way, everything that's in RAM can be stored to disk and then brought back afterwards. And
Got
that has saved me a lot of battery life because, I'll be able to get 5 or 10 minutes worth of work in and then come back an hour later and it'll have automatically shut down and saved all that battery life. But battery life is going to continue to be a problem, even with the screen brightness turned way
Yeah.
down and even with the tweaks you can put in. Just for some reason, it just doesn't seem to, the batteries don't seem to do as well. And I've stated before that GNOME is really a great way to go with a tablet if you're going to have Linux on a machine, because it's really made for that one screen experience and it's really optimized for touch. But I have used Cinnamon quite a bit on touch screens, and it can be used, but the problems get to be, you have to adjust things so that everything's a little bit bigger, or at least I do because I got these fat fingers.
Yeah, I was going to ask about this because I remember I've for the longest time I've heard you talk about your tablets and Linux Mint and putting cinnamon on, and I've always wanted to know. I mean, I know now there are some specific optimizations that are occurring in cinnamon and mint, but for the longest time that wasn't the case. So
Well,
how did you find it?
but it's still, there's a lot of tweaking that you have to do. A lot less than it used to be, but you still have to go in and set the keyboard to come up every time you're in a text field, and then you have to turn that off every time you do connect a keyboard and mouse to it. And then sometimes, even with that turned on, it won't come up. So then you need a hotkey down at the bottom so that you can pop that keyboard up real quick. And then you also have to tweak how your keyboard comes up. Do you just want it to come up as transparent? Do you want it to take over a part of the screen and push everything upwards? Do you want it split because you have a giant freaking tablet so that half of it's on the left and half of it's on the right, and you can do that whole thumb typing thing? You can set all that stuff. It's just, it's not easy to go in and reset it later. And making sure it comes up when you need it is also the difficult part. But
yeah, and I actually saw that. So I was live, running live ISOs of a bunch of different stuff. I just have Ventoy and I put a bunch on there and just booted through them. And there was definitely a difference between not only Ubuntu and Fedora, and like where GNOME is sort of vanilla, and something like Pop OS and others were, and Pop, that's the one that's coming to mind right now, where it would work for GNOME and GTK apps, but anything that wasn't like a Flatpak or something that wasn't like a native app, it wouldn't bring the keyboard up. And in some cases, even if I manually toggled it, it would not input characters into those fields. I don't know if that was a containerization thing where the keyboard couldn't get to, like, so it's not a universal that you just tap a field like in Android and like, oh, the keyboard pops up. I definitely saw that. So yeah, GNOME was much better. I'm pretty captivated now. I just assumed that Cinnamon had no real support for touch. So now that you're saying that you're saying I'm hearing this, like I
you can really put it in yourself is the whole thing. It's obviously not designed for touch, but you can definitely use it. I mean, the taskbar, you gotta, or at least I have to increase the size on it so it's not so narrow, so that I can actually touch things there. Now, I also, if I have a tablet, I want to be able to also use it as a laptop. That's just me, though. So
right. Well, that's what led me to this in the first place, right? I have this nice Samsung Galaxy Tab. It's a 12-inch screen. It's looks great. It sounds great. The speakers are amazing. Like there's everything great from a hardware perspective. It was really just hamstrung by the software. And I thought, okay, well, if I had a device like this that I could run actual Linux on, and then it wasn't just this newest tablet. This has been for years that I've thought of this. Like if I had a device like that I could get, a first-class Linux experience on, would that allow me then? And you're right, Majid, it is definitely a trade-off. It is 100% like, okay, a tablet is optimized, it's got an ARM processor, and this thing will last for 12 hours straight watching. You could binge. Well, it depends, but if you have HDR, some other stuff will take away from that. But I mean, in general, you could probably just sit there and binge, and I have movies and videos, and like it's still going, or the standby time, is seemingly indefinite. So, but I don't have those expectations. Like I understand that this is an actual computer, right? This is 100% x86, like real deal processor, tons of memory, tons of storage. Like it's got all this stuff. It's running a full desktop environment. It's got all systemd and all the rest of the schedulers and the kernel and all this stuff happening. Like I get, there's no way that it's going to be as good with battery life. But I also know that if I boot into Windows, which has an equivalent set of capabilities, that somehow I get a huge uptick in battery life. So that's a Linux and a kernel issue. That's not something that, maybe there are some few things that I can do to fix that and make it a little better, having the better battery, like I said, and so some little tweaks. But ultimately, I just have to be okay with the fact that I'm more interested in having a capable device with a shorter battery life than a less capable device with a long battery life. I'm okay with that. But these are all things that this has been my journey through life in general, technology, everything, where I can have someone like Joe, who's done all this 10 times over, tell me the best way to do it. But I'm pig-headed enough that I'm just going to have to do it myself and figure out the best way. And I think that's just one trait that a lot of us share, where we tinker. We have to play with things. We have to figure it out. So anyway, all that to say,
it's
Go ahead.
horses for courses, as you say. It's horses for courses, and there are certain trade-offs that I might be happy with that you are not happy with, and Joe might be happy with. Sorry, Joe might not be happy with, and then you might be happy with, or whatever. And so, it is a case of you're right. I think with something like this in general, you have to suck it and see. You have to have a go at what it is and figure out what it is that you're happy with and what you're not happy with. I
Try
think you're
out the things
100%.
that work for you, and
Yeah.
maybe the things that work for me just plain don't work for you.
Well, let
My
me ask you.
workflow is different than yours.
So outside of Gnome itself, obviously they put a high price on touch friendliness and supporting gestures and all that stuff. And honestly, Wayland, I think, has been a big part of that because fractional
Mm.
scaling has made that device easier to use.
Mm.
Helps.
It does help, yeah. So, but does a pen help? Have you found that you could sit with a pen and actually engage with the interface and do different things?
So I have a well, I mean, it's a Galaxy S22 Ultra, but it's basically a Galaxy Note, isn't it? Because they kind of unified the branding between Note and S line Samsung, and one of the eureka moments, if you want to. Sad life that finds the guy finds this like this interesting, but one of the eureka moments I had was when I realized that the pen was basically my mouse, and I could then use the pen as a mouse on the phone screen. And it's again one of these things that, do you need it? No. Do you get used to doing certain things in that manner? Yes. And if you do, you notice it when the option isn't available. So
It seems like Samsung Note people in particular, because they have that little stylus on board. I always see them like
yeah,
like you can spot them.
yeah. I
No,
mean,
on my phone, yeah, on my phone it's helpful, but I have never found a stylus to be helpful on a tablet.
Okay.
I found it. I like it on tablets, and I make sure that any tablet that I buy has stylus support because, as I mentioned, I do take quite a lot of handwritten notes. I
Okay.
so whenever I'm at any kind of conferences or when I'm doing any kind of learning courses and stuff like that, I still find it easier personally to write things down rather than type
Type
things
them.
down.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, that's just me personally. Again, it's one of the trade-off type things, isn't it? It's just something that because I can then order things around in the way that I want, underline things, circle, blah blah blah, whatever, um and so, and that's why I was mentioning that I always used to keep a Windows install on because Windows 10 and 11 work quite well with stylus inputs, and Linux, unfortunately, doesn't. Android,
It
the
doesn't.
Sam, yeah, it did. I
No,
didn't
Okay. Well,
find.
look,
so
with
that's
Windows
what I'm
devices,
asking.
with Apple devices, you get that pressure sensitivity. I've seen people do just insane artwork with just a stylus on different devices, and you really can't get that. I've never seen drivers that work that well in
Yeah,
Linux
Uh,
for that
and
gotcha.
type
that's
of
the
thing.
issue. That's the issue. That's the
So
issue.
that's
You
like
did. You
Wacom stuff and all that sort of input driver for the pen interface. Okay. Okay. So, but it's good enough for a click, but not for something like
no. Yeah.
nuanced like
Yeah,
pressure.
yeah. So, and that's exactly what I found. That if I wanted to use it like a mouse,
Yeah.
I could, but if I wanted to make notes, no, I'd have to go into the Windows partition and open up OneNote or
Gotcha. Okay.
Notion or whatever.
Well,
Um,
this is all
the-
helpful because I don't, again, I think it's a lot about expectations. If you
Mhm.
have a certain expectation of something and it doesn't meet that expectation, then you have a certain level of disappointment. Whereas
Yeah.
if I understand, because another thing I want to touch on here, and I know we're going a little long, but I wanted to touch on ease of use with stuff like facial recognition,
Mm,
biometrics, fingerprint sensors, because something I've noticed on tablets and mobile devices is you pick it up and you kind of just want to use it.
yeah.
Whereas talking again about the on-screen keyboard, I have a complex password with numbers, letters, and symbols. And in order to put in that password every single time I pick up this thing as a tablet is it's a bit of a pain in the butt, actually.
Look, it's a pain in the butt putting it into your Android device too.
Yeah, I
But I'm
mean,
using biometric on Android, whereas
yeah. So what I find is, and this is when it does get a little bit annoying. Actually, I've had a couple of devices which have had biometric kind of solutions. I remember again one of the Lenovo Mix tablets had a fingerprint sensor. It just would not work under Linux. Full stop.
no,
Yeah.
no, of course not.
As far as the OS was concerned, it did not exist.
Right.
I've had that on a couple of other Lenovo's as well. Same, they've all got fingerprint sensors, or the Asus has Windows Hello with the iris thing, and Linux just doesn't do it. And
But you know what? That's
my T560, I managed to get it to work on Bodhi and Mint.
oh, cool.
oh, neat.
But
Wow.
my T560 is now Dale's T560, and my T580, I've got a fingerprint sensor I can't get it to do anything with. So
Yeah.
I don't know what the difference was between the 560 and the 580 in terms of fingerprint software, but I did all the right things and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose this stuff is going to be specifically proprietary. There's going to be issues around security and security chips and all that sort of stuff. So it's probably not surprising, but it is a bit annoying because, again, it increases that barrier of, as I said, what do you do with the tablet? You just take it, you just switch it on, and you get on with it, right? If I was going to, you don't want to be going and spending 2-3 minutes just putting your password in and putting it in properly and this that, by which time you're like, oh, forget this, I'm putting it back down again. Let me just get my laptop, let me just put my desktop on, or whatever.
Well, that's another great thing about having the detachable keyboards, because like the Latitude model that Eric has, which I also have like one of or two of,
Right.
and then the Dell Venue 11 Pro, which has the attachable keyboard with an extra battery, and actually I like that one a little bit better because it's a hard keyboard and it will support the screen. But hook that up, type in the passwords, whatever, use the touchpad for a little bit, disconnect it again, and you're off.
Yeah, and you're right. A lot of times I do that. I pick it up. It's already got the case on the keyboard because I don't want to have it just sitting around with the screen unprotected. And so I'll open it, put in the password, and then pull the keyboard off, and then go from there. Actually, funny enough, I've noticed that Ubuntu, for whatever reason, always starts in portrait mode. So it's like, what the heck? I have to actually disconnect and then reconnect.
It gets into portrait mode quite a few times, which is really annoying.
No,
I think it must be something to do with the gyroscope or something.
Well, no, not necessarily with the gyroscope, just with how the screen firmware is set up. Because in a lot of like distros, like with even with my 1X, that little mini laptop that I have, it starts out in the wrong mode, and I have to run a script that automatically convert it. And then, I do have that particular one, since it has the full-time attached keyboard stuff.
You talked about that on the Linux Link Tech Show, I think.
Yeah, well, with a lot of, especially like ARM tablets and a lot of lesser known tablets, it's another thing where you have to. A lot of them won't even read the gyroscope correctly, and so you have to set up a lot of scripting in order to be able to switch between portrait and landscape mode. Sometimes you'll be able to read the gyroscope, but there won't be any code to automatically make it flip. And so then you have to generate your own script that runs full time as a system program. So that way, when the gyroscope reads X number, then it does the flipping and then flipping back, and et cetera, et cetera. I've done all that, and I've also then lost the code several times, and having to redo it kind of sucks. But and I don't know, have you guys tried putting Linux onto an ARM tablet?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was going to ask this question actually because we've talked a lot about battery life, and I suppose the one
I was going to get to that.
well, one way that we can try and make that better is if we were using it on a specific ARM device. I have found it actually quite difficult to find a Linux distro that works on. Okay, let me rephrase that. Getting a Linux distro to work on any number of Windows PCs, laptops, desktops is an order of magnitude easier than trying to do the same on an ARM tablet.
Well,
Whatever that might be, it can be done, I have been told. I have not been successful in my attempts.
okay, this is where I'm going to jump in here, because there are ARM Windows tablets, and it all depends on how well known they are and how well used they are. I will say that I was able to put Linux onto the Dell Venue 8 Pro, which is a Windows tablet, but it runs the Atom Z3740D processor. And
Which is still x86, I think, isn't it?
it, is that one x86? I thought
I
that was
think
ARM.
no, it's x86. It's 32-bit.
Okay, but even that one's a pain in the butt to get on. And so with ARM processors, and there are some like off-brand ones, but you have to have the specific model number of the processor itself, and then a Linux build that's made directly for that. And then yes, you can install, but there is no guarantee that the drivers for anything will work, as in the touch screen,
Yeah.
or as we were saying, the gyroscope to get it to go back and forth between portrait or landscape. And even sometimes you'll get Linux running on there, but you won't have the drivers for the screen. So you have no way of knowing. So mostly I stay away from ARM when it comes to putting stuff on there, because there's also no telling like when a update is just going to brick everything.
So the only way that I have managed to have any semblance of success is by putting on a Linux phone OS. So like UbiPorts, Fosh, something like that. But then you need to find the device which it is which is supported by it, and then fundamentally what you're getting then is a phone OS on a bigger screen. Now you could argue that Android on tablets is basically Android phones on a bigger screen, but that's a separate discussion, I suppose.
No,
No,
I would argue that Android tablets are toys.
the point being that yeah, it's not going to be. So that thing about Eric talking about, I want a full-fledged computer. You're not going to get that if you're putting on UB ports, even if it is on a supported device. I need to check actually what devices UB ports does actually support actually.
Well, I think so. A purpose-made device like a Pine Tab or something like that, I think
Pine
would
phone.
probably. Well, no, I mean like a Pine
The
Tab.
Pine Tab, Pine phone. I'm saying that the operating systems on the Pine phone
Gotcha.
are yeah. Go ahead.
Understood. So yeah, I mean something. I would imagine that taking anything and trying to get Linux to run on it when it wasn't built for it is you're going to run into. Talk about making concessions and setting expectations. You're probably not going to have like a full-fledged experience. Now, is it worth it because you get better battery life? Maybe. But I think at the end of the day, the reason that x86 is so powerful, is so popular, is that it is compatible. If it's an x86 system, and that's one of the confusing and frustrating things about ARM in general, is that there is a sort of standard, but everybody kind of does different things. And it makes it almost impossible to have any sort of like
Linux
uniformity. Yeah. I mean, how do you build a kernel for 20 different things or 100 different things, or,
right,
it's
which
just
is why the first generation of the what was that Windows tablet, the Surface, the RT, Why, anybody that asks me if they should buy one of those and try and install Linux on them, my answer is not no, but hell no. Because you're not going to get it.
Yeah. So I do think, and I wonder if Risk 5 will be an option, even though Risk is not necessarily, I mean, it's hard to say, right? But I do think that something like a Pine Tab might be a better experience, just simply because it is designed for at least something like Manjaro, UbiPorts. Like, there's going to be a certain set of software that they know will run on it. And that at least is a starting point for someone else who wants to pick it up and do different things.
Yeah.
Whereas you get something like was it Asahi, where they jumped on and they're working on the Mac stuff and the M1 processor.
Yeah, getting Linux on an M series.
Now-
Reverse engineering and all that stuff. Now, because those products are so popular, that's worth their time to do that. But like Joe's saying, taking some random Surface product or something that has a very limited run or very niche product and trying to get something working on it is really lost effort. There's no return on that. Whereas something like, let's get this working on Mac's version of, an ARM chip, then yeah. So I think there is room for ARM in the equation, but I don't think it's just any random Android tablet or something that you pick up.
Yeah, there has to be some kind of uniform standard with ARM before it becomes a reliable place for Linux. Now, I know the Atoms are lower power than your i-series, which is probably why I was confabulating it with ARM. But even those, the battery life was still kind of hot garbage running Linux. So...
Yeah. So what started me on this whole talk or path? I mean, I've wanted to do this for years, honestly, but the thing that really kicked this off was the Starlight tablet from Star Labs, which has a I'm looking for the processor that's in there because it is an x86 processor, but it's one of the newest, lowest watt TDP. It's definitely a trade-off between power and performance. It's not going to be like, I honestly think this Latitude is probably faster than this Starlight tablet is. But the Starlight, because it's built for Linux, the cameras are going to work. Biometrics are going to work if there's anything built in. Everything is just going to be handed to you. You can pick from 15 different versions of Linux, and it's all supported. Versus, yes, it happens to run on this Latitude, but the cameras don't work. Fingerprint reader doesn't work. There's just going to be stuff that just is never going to be first class. The battery, all this stuff. So I would say that if you want a first class experience on a tablet on Linux, this is the promise of the future, is that there are companies like Star Labs that are making hardware that is built for purpose. Well, and if it wasn't $800, I probably would get one.
Like your tablet is basically a freaking laptop without the keyboard attached, without a hard keyboard attached. So it can be a desktop replacement if you really wanted it to be.
I used it all morning with the tablet cover or the keyboard cover. It's like using. I mean, it's the only difference is it's just a little smaller than the other one, and the keyboard's not as good. But I mean,
right? Yeah,
it is a laptop. There is no trade-off, no concessions made in terms of the power of just sitting there using a browser, using anything I pull up on there. I mean, short of probably like how long it takes to encode a video or something like that.
The only thing it's missing is replaceable RAM. That's the only thing it's missing. It does have the replaceable M.2. It's got the replaceable radio for Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. And then I know most of them have another slot for like a cellular connection, which can then be repurposed to with like a 2230 to have a second hard drive. So you can have 2 hard drives on this thing. Plus it's got that micro SD slot. Plus, it's got what, 2 USB,
two
or
USB-Cs and one USB-A.
right?
No, I'm
So
telling you, for $150, it's stupid how good a deal it is. Like, it's just unbelievable for
and
anyone
you
that
can
wants a thin and light.
you can find a better deal than that, but you have to be
Yeah,
willing to work on it too, or willing
right.
to buy peripherals for it, or
Right. This was the only anything that you could complain about is that the battery was only 60% health, which I knew a 5-year-old device. I mean, there aren't many 5-year-old devices that were in constant use that aren't going to be in that condition.
you can also find them cheaper if they don't include the hard drive.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Or the operating system or something like that. Anyway, we're getting that look from Bill and Moss at this point where the three of us have geeked out a little too long.
We have literally had conversations for hours at a time on this
No.
very topic. I'm really surprised that we weren't all talked out by the time we got here today.
Hey, and listen, don't think this is the last time you're going to hear about it too, because at least in my wonderings, I'm still going to be talking about it because it's something that I think is an interesting goal to have the best of all things, right? This idea of I don't need convergence because I've just got a single device that kind of does all the things. And I think it's really cool, and I've had a lot of fun doing it. I really
And
appreciate
don't
you
worry,
guys.
we've got more, and check this out.
So anyway, all right. I think I can get us out of this innards and on to vibrations from the ether.
There is no buzz.
Nothing, no love.
Nobody
Now
sent us
listen.
anything.
Now listen, folks. I want someone. I don't care who it is, and I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but I know people are listening, and I hope people are enjoying it. And I know it's an extra step, but we would love to hear some feedback from anyone out there. It's been way too many weeks without any vibrations from the ether, so let us
Tell
know.
us.
We've only been
what
doing this for
topics you
15
want.
years. You can't be tired of us yet.
Tell us what
Yeah.
topics you want to talk about. I can't promise we'll do that topic, but we're much more likely to do it if you send it to us than not.
No, that's a great idea. We welcome ideas for show content. We just tend to go off of what we've been playing around and working with, which hopefully is diverse and interesting enough to everyone listening. But yeah, if there's anything that you would like to hear, anything we talk about that you want more information on, anything, maybe you're having a problem and you want some free tech support, whatever it is, hit us up. Vibrations from the ether. We would love to include you in the show.
mintCast at mintcast.org.
Thanks, Moss. All right, check this out.
So I've put a couple of things in. Check this out. I put just a few links about Ubuntu Touch, as we were mentioning about Linux on tablets and things, and a link to the Pine Tab 2, which interestingly comes in both ARM and RISC-V architectures. And
Yes,
also,
the ARM isn't really ready to go yet in terms of a consumer device, and the RISC-V is way behind.
oh yeah, I mean, there's a big disclaimer on the website saying, this is basically going to be janky, which is at least they're being upfront and honest about it. But I thought it would be useful to put them in the show notes, and also for those people who seem to think that anesthetist is the most difficult thing to say in the world, I'd like to point out that there is a song by Enter Shikari, a British heavy metal group, called Anesthetist. Enjoy, although it's not really safe for work.
Look, Linux is not ready for prime time on a phone. It is not a daily driver ready on a phone. I'm sorry.
And that has to do with
Agreed.
expectations. I think that's really comes down to, because we've started to rely on our phones for the apps, it's really comes down to the apps, right? And that's where Linux can draw a window. It can, browse and connect to a network. It can do
I'm
all those
sorry I
things.
opened that bag right there.
If
Let-
Android
No.
wants to do it,
No,
let
no,
it
no,
do it.
no.
It's true,
I'm just
because if it wasn't true, BlackBerry would have been able to keep
Yep.
a foothold in the industry. But
Absolutely.
It's all down to the apps. So there
Oh,
you
I
go.
agree.
Yep. So just wanted to qualify that. We're not saying that it can't ever be, but there's definitely some hurdles there to take care of. So anyway, all right. housekeeping and announcements. I'd like to thank you for listening to this episode of mintCast. If you see something that you'd like to hear about, tell us. Send us an email at mintcast@mintcast.org. Join us live on YouTube. Post at the mintcast subreddit, which we don't really check so much anymore, I don't think, but it's there. You can chat with us on Telegram and Discord, or post directly at mintcast.org. Our next episode will be 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Sunday, December 10th. Oh my goodness, is it actually December already? Hard to believe. You can get mintCast converted to your time with a link in the show notes. For 426, next roundtable live stream, 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Saturday, December 2nd, 2023. For 426.5, next roundtable live stream is 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Saturday, December 16th. Both of those have links for converting those times to your local time zone in the show notes. Live stream information is at mintcast.org/livestream, which leads us to our wrap-up. Joe, where can we find you?
Well, I am on a couple other podcasts. I'm on the Linux Link Tech Show, which you can find at tllts.org. I'm on the Linux Lugcast, which is at linuxlugcast.com. You can send me an email, jb@mintcast.org, or you can buy me a coffee with Ko-fi. Awesome.
Well, this is my 99th episode of mintCast, but if you're not tired of me yet, you can hear me weekly on Full Circle Weekly News, about every 5 weeks on Distro Hopper's Digest. My email is bardmoss@pm.me. My Mastodon is at zyvala@hosttux.social, and you can find my other contact information at itsmoss.com. Bill?
Well, you can email me, bill@mintcast.org. I'm Bill_H on Discord, at WCHauser3 at fostodon.org, on the Mastodon. Also, check out my other two podcasts, Linux OTC and Three Fat Truckers. Linked to both of those in the show notes. Majid?
So you can email me on drmajid@mintcast.org. I'm on at atypicaldoctor870 on Twitter, atypicaldoctor on Instagram and Threads, and the Atypical Doctor podcast on Spotify. What about you, Eric?
Don't let him fool you. He's the atypical anesthetist and always will be. You can hear me and see me, because a lot of these podcasts are also video, on this and the Linux OTC podcast, as well as Linux Saloon and Linux Lugcast streams, as well as Distro Hopper's Digest. If you'd like to get in touch with me, I can be reached by email at eric@mintcast.org. I'm on Discord, Telegram, Matrix, and Mastodon as well, with links in the show notes for all of those.
Actually, you've got a YouTube channel, haven't you, Eric? You slipped that in that last episode. I went and started looking for it, but I couldn't find it.
You couldn't? No, it's at Eric S. Adams. Eric Adams YT. That's what it is. And yeah, I've got about 2,500 followers. I made a ton of videos about 4 or 5 years ago, and just burned myself out. And so I haven't done anything since, but it's still there.
Got those YouTube bucks and called it quits.
Oh my goodness. I made at least $100 a year. Well worth all those hours I put in. No, I had fun doing it, and I may in fact do it again. But yeah, it's a lot of just like tech troubleshooting kind of stuff. So it's really boring. But if you like Linux, maybe there's something there that can help you. But anyway. All right. Before we leave, we want to make sure and acknowledge some of the people who make mintCast possible. Somebody, probably Bill, for our audio editing. Archive.org for hosting our audio files. Hobstar for our logo. InitRD for the animated Discord logo. Londoner for our time syncs and various other contributions. Bill Hauser for hosting the server. Who's that guy? Which runs our website maintenance, and the Nextcloud server on which we host our show notes and raw audio.
And Bill's kid.
Yes, and Bill's kid for the new show music. The Linux Mint development team for the fine distro we love to talk about. Thanks, Clem.
Thanks, Clem.
And company.
Thanks, Clem.
It's a wrap.